So welcome all. The council has just returned from closed session, which we recessed, and we will be returning to after our city council meeting. And so there is currently nothing to report at the moment, unless our city attorney had something that he felt necessary to say.
I'll just say there was no reportable action so far. Excellent.
Thank you. All right. So we will call to order the regular session of the City Council of the City of Atascadero. And I will ask Councilmember Bourbeau to lead us in a pledge to the flag.
All right. Please join me in saluting our nation's flag. Oops. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bourbeau.
Here.
Councilmember Darris.
Here.
Councilmember Funk.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Here.
Mayor Moreno.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Well, if you are watching or listening tonight, we welcome you to the council meeting. If you would like to speak during any time that has been set aside for community forum or during public comment for one of the items that is on our agenda, you can do so in a couple of ways. If you're on the webinar, you'll notice a button at the bottom of the webinar that says raise hand. And when I open public comment or community forum, please raise your hand and we will call on you for comment. If you are on the phone currently, you can press *9. If you are watching or listening on the radio and you haven't called in yet, you can still do so. So 805-438-2888 is the number you can call to give public comment. And when you do call in, let us know which item it is that you would like to provide comment on. Again, that number is 805-538-2888. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
We've got a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Newsom and a second by Councilmember Bourbeau, and we will waive the reading in full of all ordinances appearing on this agenda, and the titles of the ordinances will be read aloud by the city clerk at the first reading after the motion and before the council votes. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bourbeau.
Yes.
Councilmember Darris.
Yes.
Councilmember Funk.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And now we are on to a presentation that we did earlier today, and I will ask Laura, are we going to be showing the video for this?
We are. I think Luke has it uploaded and can get that going.
Okay, so I'll let all of you know who are watching, the public. We had agreed during our last meeting, and so at 4 o'clock today we met on the steps of City Hall and we presented a proclamation in appreciation and recognition of the Atascadero's first responders, and so we will share that with you now.
Atascadero's first responders risk their own safety in the performance of their duties to protect our community, are ready to respond 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and are the first and best defense against emergencies that threaten our community. And whereas the City of Atascadero recognizes the supreme efforts of all our first responders, who quietly and resolutely face a multitude of hazards on a daily basis, selflessly putting themselves into harm's way and rushing into dangerous situations during times of emergency in order to assist others. And
whereas Atascadero's finest first responders regularly and frequently encounter extremely hazardous situations, which include locating and apprehending dangerous suspects, working in violent storms, and down trees and wires to keep streets and homes from flooding, rescuing trapped residents, burning buildings, firefighting, fighting wildfires, conducting search and rescue operations, performing rescues from violent car crashes, 2021 COVID-19 pandemic, continuing to provide emergency response and assisting members of the public. And whereas these individuals who dedicate themselves to public service, from 911 dispatchers, law enforcement officers, firefighters, public works crews, and all of our staff members who provide public safety in one form or another, come together as first responders to protect and aid the public in the event of an emergency. And
whereas Atascadero's first responders are vital members of our city family, we're not only dependent upon to maintain safety and security within our community, but are also those who are happy to provide emergency as well as non-emergency aid and assistance with the highest degree of care, integrity, and respect. And whereas the city of Atascadero strongly supports all of our public safety personnel and is truly thankful for their continued dedication, efforts, compassion, and caring.
Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Atascadero hereby proclaims the sincerest respect, honor, support, and gratitude for all of our Atascadero's first responders for everything that they do to keep our community safe from harm.
Thank you, Laura. Wind is not the friend of video, but hopefully you could hear that. And it was wonderful that we could get together like that, since we are not in person right now at City Hall, which is what we would normally do, but that we were able to bring everyone together. And such thanks and appreciation, as we said. And I want to thank Councilmember Darras for bringing that up at our last meeting. It was really important, and I appreciate you bringing that forward, and all of us being able to do that. So thank you.
My honor, and thank you all for joining in. It was a good thing.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, we will move on to our consent calendar. Consent calendar, or actually, I would ask, I'm going to back up here, Laura. I don't know if anyone is prepared, but do any of the employees want to say something? I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I didn't know if anyone had prepared and wanted to say anything.
It does look like Zach Jackson has his hand up.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Zach.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. For the public, my name is Zach Jackson. I'm the president of the Atascadero Professional Firefighters Association. And on behalf of the Atascadero Professional Firefighters Association, I just wanted to thank the City Council for continuous support for all of our public safety across the city. It's been very tough times for 2020 and 2021, and we just appreciate all of your continuous support then and moving forward for our future. I'd also want to thank just the community for their support as well. It's a big part of what we do is serving and protecting the community, and we just want to thank the community as well.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. And I do see Miranda on. I know that you were there this afternoon. I don't know if you wanted to come on and say, of course, I mean, Zach kind of said it, but if you were there, let's see, who else am I seeing? I know we've got our chief on, if our chief wanted to mention anything, Chief Masterson, and of course, Director DeBar, if either of you wanted to say anything.
Hi, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the chance to speak, and I'll echo Zach's comments. It's nice to have recognition from the City Council and from the public, just to recognize how hard your first responders work for your community. It's our honor to do so, but it's always nice to see that recognition. And it has been a tough year and a half for first responders across the board, but we'll get through that, and we get through everything else, and we just appreciate serving the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Mayor Moreno, I'd just like to say a couple of things too. Sorry we didn't have more public works staff there. They actually start early these days, 6 to 2:30. But I know on behalf of Public Works, we appreciate Council's recognition. And We also really appreciate the police department and fire departments. We work very, very well together. And our staff, including our new operations manager and our current wastewater operations manager, really appreciate the partnership that we have with the other departments.
Thank you, Director. And it really, and in addition to these three departments, I will just say our entire city, we have a pretty phenomenal staff in departments that work together very cohesively, a lot of synergy, very good relationships, and you make that easy for us as a council. So thank you all for the work that you do and the commitment and dedication you have to our city. I have a quick logistical question, and this might be for Luke. Luke, typically in the meetings, I'm able to basically take off any non-video participants, so I'm not seeing Hollywood squares with a bunch of names. I'm not able to do that tonight for some reason. If you have any tips for me.
Usually, if you click on the three dots in any of the webcams, there'll be an
I
option
have
to
only a hand. I don't have the three dots. It's not the usual that I see. So
right up in the upper right hand corner, you'll see a view.
Yes.
Click on that and then uncheck show non-video participants.
It's not giving me that option.
Interesting. All right, let me do some troubleshooting.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and continue, but I appreciate that. All right, so now we are on to our consent calendar, and items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and non-controversial by city staff and can generally be approved in one motion if there's no member of the council or the public that wishes to comment or pull an item. If we do comment or wish to have a discussion, we will pull an item and we can vote on that separately. So I will look to council to see if there is anyone of my colleagues that is wishing to pull an item. All right, seeing none, I will look to the public. If you were in the webinar and there is any item on our consent calendar that you would like to pull or make a comment on, please raise your hand. If you're on the phone, please press *9. All right, we have a Sarah Reinhardt. Sarah, could you let us know which item it is that you're wanting to pull?
Hi, good evening. I am here and I realize I am here to comment on the ARPA allocation, but I think I can do that after the consent agenda. So I think I'll just wait my turn.
Well, actually, that is the American Rescue Plan Act funds. That's what you wanted to comment on?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you hold tight there. Let me see if there's anyone else wishing to pull anything for comment. I'm not seeing anything. Luke, anyone on the phone?
Not for this item.
All right, Laura, have we received any public comment via email?
We have not, but I do need to make a comment on A1 before you take action.
Okay, so Laura, can we just have a public comment on A5 and then make your change, and then assuming we decide to pass it, do it all together, or would you have me do 1 through 4 first?
I believe if she's just making a comment, then you can go ahead and have that comment, and then we can let me make my comment, and then we can take a
perfect
motion.
Thank you. So Ms. Reinhardt, is it simply comment, or is there
it's just a comment?
Okay,
it is just a comment.
Open that comment, and you're welcome to your 3 minutes. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, I will do my best to get this under 3 minutes. Hello, my name is Sarah Reinhardt from the We Are the Care initiative. Our world has started shifting towards a new kind of normal, which brings an overwhelming sense of positivity and hope for the future. Now it is time for us to focus on all that needs rebuilding. Before the pandemic, families were challenged to access affordable quality childcare options in SLO County. And now the situation is all the more dire. We have lost over 1,000 licensed childcare slots, and more are still threatened today. Persistent financial and mental hardships for families and children exist in SLO County as a result of the pandemic as well. Local funding allocations as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 offer a unique opportunity to support those in our community that have been most disproportionately affected by COVID. Among these are families with young children such as mine. Children under the age of 6 represent 5% of the population of SLO County, which is why we urge the city of Atascadero to invest 5% of your ARPA allocation in support of your youngest residents and their families. This is a request we're asking of all cities as well as the County Board of Supervisors. Strong families create a bolstered economy which strengthens the communities in which infants and toddlers can learn, grow, and thrive. First 5 SLO County, in collaboration with We Are the Care and a coalition of local partners, offer the city a suite of 8 proposed strategies for these one-time ARPA investments. These strategies focus on strengthening local systems of support in childcare, mental health, and stable housing that will help keep our community, our economy, our families, and our children on the road to recovery. Details surrounding these strategies will be submitted to City Council members in the next week. These strategies include strengthening the local childcare system infrastructure, family resource center operations and facilities, access to childcare through vouchers, small business grants for childcare programs, workforce development for childcare professionals, childcare facility capacity, mental and behavioral health support for children and families, and finally, family housing stabilization. The time to act is now. The pandemic has created a mountain of uncertainty, loss, and worry for families. Whether we're facing health concerns, loss of childcare and early education opportunities, social isolation, or job loss and unemployment and underemployment, we urge you to set aside 5% of the American Rescue Plan Act funding provided to your city governments as investments in the first 5 years of life. For ways to get involved with We Are the Care, please contact First 5 San Luis Obispo County. Go to first5slo.org, and thank you so much for your time and your continued support of young children and families in our community. Thanks again for letting me speak today.
You're welcome. And good job. You were right on time. Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
I'm glad. Thank you for your time.
Yes. Seeing no other speakers, we will close public comment and bring it back to council. Just to let the public know, we are not making any funding decisions tonight, but we do appreciate the comments. And with that, I will ask our city clerk about the correction to item A1.
Yes, it's for the special minute for the June 9th, 2021 special meeting minutes under Councilmember Barbo's ex parte, and I had written the last sentence to say Rex Hendricks was a former owner of the project property, and he was a former owner of property in the Dove Creek area. So I will be making that change to the minutes to properly reflect that for ex parte.
Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the correction to the minutes as stated?
Also move.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Bourbeau, second by Councilmember Funk. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bourbeau?
Yes.
Councilmember Funk?
Yes.
Councilmember Daris?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom?
Yes.
Mayor Moreno?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we're on to our updates from the city manager. Turn it over to Ms. Rickard. We can't hear you, Rochelle. You might be on mute.
There we go. Thank you. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So the first item I want to talk about is the Atascadero Lakeside Wine Passport. The event will be held on Saturday, June 26th from 2 to 5 p.m. at the new Zoo Garden located at Atascadero Lake Park. Ticket holders will enjoy wine and a variety of brews along with live music and a wood-fired pizza available for purchase. A portion of the proceeds will go to support the Charles Paddock Zoo. Information can be found at Atascadero Lakeside Wine Festival, all one word, .com or via the visitatascadero.com website. And as we talked about last week or last council meeting, These passports are valid through December 31st, 2021, and will give you access to a number of free tastings at wineries throughout the area, including some breweries and I think a cidery or two. So an absolutely wonderful way to celebrate. Wanted to let you know that our community Colony Park Community Center opens on June 25th. So we will have a great variety of recreation and programs becoming available on June 28th. So go to the website, go check them out. All of our recreation programs are starting to open up, and we're excited to get people signed up and back on track. The Farmers Market Summer Sizzle kicks off on Wednesday, June 30th with live music, chef samples and recipes, along with brew and wine tastings offered by Bristol Cider House and Lone Madrone Winery. You'll also be able to purchase the cider and wine at the market. And Summer Sizzle will run each Wednesday evening throughout August 4th, except for the Wednesdays when the Mid-State Fair is running. So please come out and join Farmers Market. Enjoy our Summer Sizzle events. They're a lot of fun. Please celebrate the 4th of July at the American Music Festival at Atascadero Lake Park from 4 to 8 p.m. So enjoy sitting lakeside under the shady oaks and enjoy 3 great musical acts along with food, drinks, family fun, vendors, kids amusements, and the playground, of course. Music begins at 4 p.m. with Bremen Town, followed by Brad Elijah, and wrapping up with the Way Out West Band. General admission is free, but there is a reserved VIP area for $10 per person, and VIP plus tickets with front row seats are $20 per person. This event is an annual fundraiser for Atascadero Colony Days, and tickets are available online at atascadero4thofjuly.org. And for information about sponsorships or volunteering for the event, email info@colonydays.org. There will be a Atascadero pub crawl starting at 5 p.m. on Friday, July 9th. There will be 14 participating downtown pub locations, including Tent City, Grape Encounters, Kula Vineyards, Fossil Wine Bar, Streetside Ale, Wildfields Brew, Colony Market and Deli, Dead Oak Brewing, Whiskey in June, Forager Spirits, the Raconteur Room, Nautical Cowboy, Ancient Owl Beer Garden. That's our new, will be in our new container development there. And Drink the Poisoned Apple. To participate in the pub crawl raffle, pick up a stamp card at any one of the participating drink establishments, and then proceed to collect stamps at 4 pub locations. Once your stamp card is filled out, leave it at your last location, and then your card will be entered into a raffle, and some very generous prizes are being donated by many of our downtown businesses. So come do the pub crawl in Atascadero's downtown on July 9th from 5 p.m. until everyone closes. We've done this event in the past. It was a fun event. Please come join it, and definitely drink responsibly while you're there. The last item I have, I'm going to actually turn over to Chief Masterson. We have been receiving a lot of inquiries and phone calls and emails regarding some of the activity that's been going on around the Sunken Gardens and Centennial Plaza. And so I asked the chief if he could just tell us a little bit about what the police department has been doing, what we have scheduled in the upcoming budget, and some of the things and tools that we have and how people can help with that. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Masterson.
Thank you, Rochelle, and Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for this time. Just wanted to bring you up to speed of like Rochelle said, a few of the things going on in the downtown area and the Centennial Plaza. But I wanted to remind you of a little back information, laws that directly have impacted us in recent years. AB 109, the realignment, Prop 47, Prop 57, which took many of the crimes that we used to arrest people on as felonies and reduce them to misdemeanors. And then, of course, the biggest one is the Idaho, the Boise case, out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, which really limited how we can deal with homeless on public spaces. They have to have a place to go or the means to go to a place before we can enact anything regarding public camping. And then in addition to that, most of the crimes we're dealing with nowadays are misdemeanors. They don't quite reach the felony realm for the most part. And in the state of California, a misdemeanor to be affected as an arrest must be viewed by the officer on scene. In other words, if we don't see it, we can't arrest for it. And even if we can arrest for it, most of them are citable offenses nowadays, unfortunately. So there's, as far as our law enforcement capabilities, for most things occurring with what most people assume to be homeless persons, are really limited in the scope and means in which law enforcement can deal with it. We still respond to calls when we're called. We do the best of our ability to handle them in a reasonable manner within the constraints of the law. But with that, I just want to move on to a few things. We are fully functioning in our community action team. They've been doing outreach downtown and all about Atascadero, and that's been very effective. We've been able to make several contacts, assisting people. Matter of fact, in the incident that occurred in Centennial Plaza about a week and a half ago, our CAT officer and the psych services person were actually down in Centennial Plaza about 20 minutes before that stabbing occurred. And they were contacting a person who they were setting up for services later in the day. So they're out and about, and then we are looking forward to our new addition to the police department in the new budget year, and that's our team, Outreach for Underserved Residents. They're going to be dealing primarily with the homeless and working to get the homeless services separate from CAT. CAT is more strictly aligned for mental health issues. This will be specifically focusing on, like we said, those underserved residents of Atascadero. So we're looking forward to that addition to the police department. A few things about homeless. The latest point in time survey for homeless, which was done as part of the census, indicated there were roughly 200 persons in the Atascadero area population listed as homeless. Now that also counts people in shelters, temporary shelters, and transition housing. Those are counted as homeless in the point in time survey as well. We estimate there's, well, it's not really an estimation. The officers know almost all of them, 12 to 15 individuals that primarily we find around the Centennial Plaza area. And we've been down there at least once a week, constantly offering services to those individuals. Mostly we get people declining services of any type when we contact them. We do multiple patrol checks throughout the day, the uniformed officers as well as myself. And if we see criminal acts or we are notified of criminal acts, we handle them appropriately within the scope of the law. There are four types primarily of people we consider homeless, and I think most of society considers homeless. The first type of population in the homeless are usually those people who are just down on their luck financially, and they're the quickest that we can offer assistance to because they're readily accepting the assistance, and we just have to find a place for them to stay and get back on their feet. The other type is more of a nomadic type of person. They just like the free travel, and generally those individuals don't cause a lot of problems. Matter of fact, more than likely you're never going to see them because they don't like contact. So they just kind of wander in, wander out, and go on their way. The last two are probably the ones that most people associate with homeless, and those are the mentally ill or the drug addicted or alcohol addicted. They've reached a point in their life either because of a mental illness or the addiction, or a combination of both, where they're just very difficult to serve until they reach a point in their life where they're just ready to accept the assistance. In other words, in layman's term, they've hit rock bottom and they're just ready to stop that lifestyle. We try to capture them in that time and offer them the services. For those of you familiar with addiction, physical addiction is done in about 72 hours, the physical addiction of a substance. It is the mental addiction after that that is most damaging to an individual to overcome that. When they hit a stressful point in their life, they generally wish to go back to something that makes them feel comfort at that particular moment in time. And that's when we try to get a hold of them, get them off that physical addiction, and give them the tools and the ability to overcome that mental addiction. There is obviously a criminal element to some of our homeless. They're mostly far and few between. It's usually just like everything else in society. Everybody thinks homeless are heinous people, and there are that element in homeless population, but for the vast majority, most of them are just people who need assistance, and we're trying to engage them in that aspect and get them that assistance to make them more capable to cope with normal society, as we call it. A problem we are seeing recently, as a matter of fact, during the incident down at Centennial Plaza, it came to light. Here you have 7 or 8 officers, fire personnel, paramedics, ambulance, treating victims of a violent crime and processing a crime scene. And here comes a younger teenage person tooling through the middle of our crime scene on his skateboard. And we are seeing that, and that is raising some concern where there seems to be a lower barrier threshold of younger people associating with our homeless population. And I would like to just stress the possibility of parents talking to their young ones about interactions with homeless people outside of an action group or a community group they may be serving with, and just to be cautious of that. Like I said, most of homeless people are not heinous criminals, but there are some involved in that community, and we'd hate to see younger people involved in a situation where they're associating with a group of people who may not have the best interest for them. That about wraps up most of what I have to say regarding our homeless situation in Atascadero, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I think that a lot of us have been obviously receiving questions. There's been a lot of conversation on social media, and we encourage, I think you may have said this, but just to make sure we encourage folks, when you see something, say something. We can't, our officers cannot do something without knowing about it, without it being reported. And as much as our officers are spending a lot of time in these areas and are making rounds, they can't be there 24/7. We do have, obviously other safety and other issues where they are needed. And so please do call. Chief, what would you say if someone, should they be dialing 911? Should they be dialing the office line? What would you recommend folks do when they see something?
Yeah, preferably if you don't see a crime that's in progress and life-threatening, please dial our non-emergency number. But when in doubt, 911 is always a good way to get a hold of us. In our dispatch center, it's the same person that's answering both calls. So it's regardless of which one you dial. So the important thing to stress is, like you said, Madam Mayor, is just to contact us, and so we know what's transpiring. We can't be there all the time, but we're there as much as we can be, but we still like to know what's transpiring.
Thank you. And for those of you that do want to help or to be involved, there are many organizations, ECHO, of course, most notably, that works with our homeless population. And not only do they do work at their location, they also have a team that goes to some of these areas, these problem areas that we're talking about, and contacting these individuals and attempting to build that trust and to get them into services. And so I know they're always looking for volunteers, and kind of exciting. They were named the Nonprofit of the Year for the entire Senate 17th District by Senator Laird. So really exciting. They are doing a phenomenal job, and for them to get that sort of recognition in this very large Senate district is huge. So that tells you the kind of organization that this is. So please volunteer for ECHO. You can volunteer for Loaves and Fishes. I mean, there's any number of organizations that need help, and our police are always looking for volunteers too. So please reach out if you want to be part of the solution. If you have ideas, this is a team effort. So please keep us in the loop, and we will keep this conversation going. Thank you, Chief. And I will ask our city manager if there's anything further that you had to for your report.
Nope, that wraps up my report. Thank you, Mayor and council members.
All right. And were there any council members that had questions of our city manager? All right, seeing none. Wonderful. Well, we will move on to community forum. This is the portion of our meeting that is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on a matter that is not on our agenda and over which the council has jurisdiction. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that you would state your name for the record before making your presentation. And we will have the timer going so you'll know where you are in your 3-minute clock. A maximum of 30 minutes will be allowed for community forum, and any subject that is brought up will not become a subject of discussion at tonight's meeting, having not been agendized. So I will look to the webinar, and if there's anyone that wishes to speak, you can simply raise your hand. See that icon at the bottom of the screen, raise hand. If you're on the phone, you can press *9. And if you are listening or watching on channel 20 or KPRL, you can dial 805-538-2888. I am not seeing any webinar hands. Are there any callers? Luke, it looks like we might have a caller.
Yeah, we have Wendy Lewis on the line.
So good evening, everybody. It's Wendy Lewis from ECHO. And first of all, I'd like to thank the mayor for those very kind comments about our recent award from Senator Laird. It was a pretty surreal thing to have that come to ECHO, and just it shows the hard work our team and our volunteers and the community is doing to really support us. So thank you very much for that. I'm actually calling in to publicly thank the amazing Atascadero Kiwanis. They have selected ECHO as the recipient of this year's winemaker dinner, and just want to publicly recognize how much they do for the community and for ECHO. They've been supporting us for years. They built our playground for our children. They've been bringing meals monthly for years and years and years. And so just want to put it out there that that group is just an amazing group of dedicated community servants, and just looking forward to Friday's event. It is a little bit different this year because of some COVID restrictions. So this year there'll be several locations that sponsors have bought tables to and can come together and celebrate. And the public is able to join for free and also participate in the auction. They have done an incredible job finding some amazing auction items, and that's where the bulk of the fundraising piece is raised. And all those funds will support the effort ECHO is doing as we expand our services and support the unhoused individuals in our community, like the outreach efforts that Mayor Moreno shared about, where we're not only helping people physically at our locations, but going out, meeting people where they're at, creating those relationships that will ultimately get someone ready for receiving resources and ultimately getting housed. So again, I just want to thank the Kiwanis for their amazing support to not only us, but many other organizations throughout our community, and just such a great group of people. And please, if you're interested in helping the event or purchasing one of the amazing items, you can go to our website, which is echoshelter.org. You can register right there. It's free, and you can start bidding on some of the items now. One that I think is very popular is a historic tour with Lon Allen and his Jeep. That seems to be one of the hot items, along with some other amazing things. So just again, if there's any of our fellow or the Kiwanis folks out there tonight, just thank you from all of us at ECHO, and just really appreciate the support of them and our city. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Are there any other individuals on the phone or maybe in the webinar? If you would raise your hand or press *9. Luke, do we have anyone?
Nope, just Wendy Lewis.
All right, wonderful. So I will go to our city clerk and ask if we have any public comment to be read into the record this evening.
We do have one comment that was received. I'll go ahead and read it now. Good evening. We are writing to you today regarding our concerns about the safety of our children and community due to the recent incidents near Centennial Plaza, Sunken Gardens, and the surrounding area. We had hoped to speak to you in person at the council meeting, but appreciate you reading our letter. We are not only parents, but leaders in our community involved with sports, 4-H, PTA, and numerous other organizations. We request that you listen to our concerns and continue to take action. The safety issues downtown due to drug use and homelessness have put our children, surrounding businesses, and community in danger. The recent escalation of incidents includes stabbings, assault, drug use, an incident involving a man in the creek with a gun during school hours, and an arrest of a man for lewd or lascivious acts with a child under 14. This is the same area the middle school kids congregate with friends, get dropped off by parents for school, and even visit the local orthodontist office. The issues have escalated, and now we believe that it is not if a child will get hurt, it is when. This is not acceptable. We understand that this issue is important to the City Council and APD and appreciate the recent patrolling of the area. Our concern is that the area is still unsafe for our children when they return to school in August. We want to be sure there's a plan in place to secure the area is safe for all. We ask that you add this issue to your next agenda meeting for the community to speak and express their concerns, as well as to adopt a plan of action. As parents and involved community members, we are willing to be a part of the solution. Thank you for your time. It's signed Concern Atascadero parents, Stephanie Drexler, Josh and Tracy Aldridge, Trisha England, Travis and Amanda Free, Richard and Beth Caddy, Jared Heineman, Garrett and Aubrey Pyle, Troy and Julia Witt, Doug and Iris Martin, Greg and Margot O'Quest, Eric and Kathy Schwartz, Andy and Christy Smith, Renaud Purchase, Lisa Mallory, Gordon and Sharon West, Tanya and John Litton, Guy and Kelly Azelton, and Aaron and Carrie Schechter. And that is the only comment we received.
Thank you, Laura. And seeing no other members of the public with a hand raised or a *9 on the phone, we'll close public comment and bring it back to council and staff. So yes, Kiwanis Mayor's Winemakers this Friday supporting Echo. It's a tremendous event. We've got 2 Kiwanians on our council here, and you just can't say enough about Kiwanians. You guys are now Rotary's awesome too, Charles, but this is the Kiwanis night. So, but many of us I know looking forward to this Friday and the support they offer Echo. Last year, I know they did a tremendous job supporting Loaves and Fishes. And I have a kayak that I bought only to support Loaves and Fishes, but a lot of fun things that they get in their auctions. And thank you, Echo, for the work that you do. And to the parents, I know that came after the chief talked about what we are doing, what we can do. And for any of you that want to be involved, reach out to us. We are happy to sit down with any of you and have conversation and find out where you might want to be to help be part of the solution. So now that you have a better understanding of that from the chief, please do reach out to, you can reach out directly to me, to the city manager, and we will get you plugged in. So thank you for your concern. We all share that with you. All right, we are on to our public hearings this evening. We have 3 of them. The first one is the B1 Del Rio Ranch General Plan, zoning map, and specific plan amendments in the master plan of development. So I will start by asking the council if we have any ex parte. Councilmember Funk.
Yes, I prior to this going to the design review committee or earlier in the process, met with the developer of the project. I've also met with a constituent who was opposed to the project.
Thank you. Any other members? Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Design review committee would be the only conversation.
Thank you.
Not since the last meeting at where this was discussed. At that time, I had some ex parte, but none since then.
Okay.
None.
Same here, none since the last meeting. So wonderful. We will move this forward to our development director, community development director, Mr. Phil Dunsmore.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. We're really excited to present to you tonight what we'll call the next chapter of commercial development in the Del Rio specific plan area. And I should probably correct that, commercial and residential development in the Del Rio specific plan area. And Kelly, if you could move to the next slide. Just a reminder of what location we're talking about. We did look at this site several months back when we authorized them to move forward with the general plan amendment. It's the corner, it's the southeast corner of El Camino Real and Del Rio. It's an area of the Del Rio specific plan. It's actually zoned for retail, and it does have a small portion zoned for multifamily. Next slide. Little history, just stepping back, just to clarify again, we've gone through this process a few times. The specific plan for this area originally adopted in 2012, obviously for the most part for the Walmart store and for some additional residential and some commercial and retail restaurant pads on the northern portion of the specific plan. It wasn't until 2020 that we decided to come back and do a wholesale amendment to the specific plan to really modify the list of allowable uses, primarily in the name of really easing the required traffic improvements, knowing that land uses were beginning to change, and of course the removal of the Walmart from the specific plan itself. And so what we did at that time was sort of clean the slate and eliminate those existing master plans of development. And we're excited to say that in doing that, now there's a new potential tenant for the Walmart site, which is an attractive land use, attractive set of land uses for Del Rio Ranch, which we brought to council for authorization to proceed with the general plan amendment in March. Really what the general plan amendment does on this property is pretty simple. Really just moves a residentially zoned portion of property on the site. So a lot of the commercial uses that we're looking at tonight with this project are already allowed by the specific plan, but it was brought to city council because not only we're changing the general plan a little bit, we're also changing the specific plan because the road alignment changes, some of the land use changes a little bit, and we're now looking at this different master plan of development. It's really going to be based by an RV resort, a commercial presence at the corner, a small, very small amphitheater, some commercial uses, and then of course even a hotel and some other mixed uses at the corner. The Planning Commission did also look at this in June. They did recommend that the current proposal be approved as proposed, didn't make any significant changes to it. And they also recommended the council consider an interim use plan, and that's something the applicant is going to be asking for tonight. And we'll talk about that a little later and talk about some of those details. What I'm going to do now is probably give this over to Kelly. She's got some of the details that she had presented to the Planning Commission and can more easily go through some of those specific items. And I'll be here also later on to answer your questions as well.
Thank you, Phil, and good evening, Council. So what we're looking at tonight for approval, there's a couple items involved. So we have the general plan and zoning map amendment to move the residentially zoned portion of the property. We have amendments to the specific plan, mostly focused on circulation and adjustments to the residential portion and some other minor items to be consistent with those changes. And then we have a phased master plan of development. So this will be the first master plan of development that kind of provides an overview. It's required by the specific plan for all site development. And what we're proposing tonight with the approval of this master plan of development, it includes some of the conditionally allowed uses so that the applicants have some confidence moving forward with the master plan that they've submitted. But it does require that a lot of the components come back for additional Planning Commission review. So there will be a second conditional use permit for a more refined master plan of development that has to come back to DRC and then Planning Commission for review and approval. The one exception to that is the residential portion of the site. It is one of the sites listed in our housing element. And so we are reducing barriers to approval for that site. So that will just be a DRC level approval as proposed this evening. So the proposed project concept, as Phil alluded to earlier, has about 3.6 net acres of residentially zoned land. That's a slight increase over what exists today in the specific plan area. That's about 3 acres. But because of the alignment of Obispo Road and how the uses are laying out, they are requesting that slight increase in residential area for development. There's an approximately 30,000 square foot entertainment center. They are including a parking garage to accommodate parking as best they can outside of surface level parking lots. There are some mixed use commercial light industrial buildings that will have residential on the 2nd and 3rd floors. There's that amphitheater that Phil mentioned that is proposed to be designed into the site slope to reduce noise impacts throughout the surrounding neighborhood. There's also a conference or convention center use that's planned along the Del Rio Road frontage. And then of course the tourist serving resort that has about 4.85 acres of RV sites and then has some surrounding areas for affixed glamping units such as Airstream trailers or small modular type cabins. That comprises about 1.8 acres of the site. And then there are plans for an approximately 100-room hotel. So these are just the technical details of the general plan and zoning map change. You can see the original residentially zoned area in the southeast corner of the site, which is now proposed to be just along the eastern edge of the site, bordering with Rio Rita Road. The majority of the specific plan amendment relates to circulation and the circulation diagrams. So we've made some adjustments to the circulation diagram as shown on your screen to show the realignment of the public road, which would be Obispo Road, and the secondary connector off of El Camino Real. The original specific plan did show the connector road off of El Camino Real and then connecting site to sites to the south. So this new diagram shows the realignment of Obispo Road and extension. And then again, minor amendments to ensure consistency throughout the document. So this project is a fairly large project. It encompasses the entire 26+ acres of the site. And so the applicants do have a phasing plan. So the first phase of the development would be the RV tourist resort. With that would come some of the on-site and off-site improvements, including the turn lanes and intersection configuration at what we now know as the Mission Oaks South entrance. It would also include the internal access loop for the RV and glamping sites to make sure that there's adequate emergency access. Emergency access also requires a secondary access point to ensure that there's a second way out if something were to occur on the site. And it also includes a pedestrian connection to a crossable intersection. So that would either be the intersection at Del Rio and El Camino, or they could include signalization of that Mission Oaks entry alignment instead. The second phase would be the commercial center. So this is kind of the bulk of development of the site. It would include full widening of El Camino Real and Del Rio Road, consistent with our recently adopted plan line setback for that intersection. It would also include all of the intersection improvements and signal timing needed to accommodate the reconfiguration at the intersection. There would also be the trigger for the right turn lane at the northbound 101 entrance. That would be included with this phase of development. And then if not done prior, it would include signalization of the south entrance. Phase 3 would be the multifamily residential portion of the site. So staff has included a number of conditions in your resolution of approval this evening that requires that the commercial must come before the residential development. And a little later in the presentation, we'll be recommending a couple of modifications to the conditions to really strengthen that language and make sure that our expectations are known for that development area. The multifamily would also include build out of Obispo Road extension. We do expect at least portions of Obispo Road to be built with other phases of development, but when phase 3 comes along, this would be the full build out of Obispo Road. And then all on and off site improvements for prior phases will have to be done prior to occupancy of the residential portion. And we have some modifications to some conditions to clarify that as well. And then phase 4 is the conference facility, the hotel and amphitheater. Although this phase is permitted to be built with any of the other phases if they were to get an operator or there would be demand for this use. So this is a little bit of a floating phase. So I just wanted to go over a couple details of the site plan that we have, especially circulation. So we can see at the top, we have that alignment with Obispo Road. So this will be a local collector road, two-way traffic, turn lanes as necessary based on traffic demands, and will align with the existing Obispo Road. We don't have a complete traffic report for detailed site plan. That will come with the subsequent conditional use permit for the master plan of development. There's a possibility that turning movements out of Obispo Road may be restricted based on site distance, some of the characteristics of that curving road. But we will do that analysis when it comes back for a refined master plan of development at that time. Because this may have a restricted turning movement, we also ensured that this road adjacent to the RV portion of the development along the south portion of the site could be used as a secondary connector road for the residential uses above and to the south. And that would lead them down to the signalized intersection that aligns with the current south driveway entry point of the Mission Oaks Plaza. So that would allow for a secondary connection through the site for the residential uses. The rest of the roads would be private on-site roads. They are designed as narrow roads to sort of facilitate walkability through the site and sort of a pedestrian focus to the development area. There's a number of plaza spaces planned off of that sort of main commercial road, as well as sort of the amphitheater and gathering spaces for the convention center. There is some parking included adjacent to the road and adjacent to the mixed use buildings just to facilitate ease of use of those buildings, but a majority of the parking is proposed to be in the attached parking structure that's located adjacent to the entertainment center at the corner. The applicants were very mindful about creating a large commercial presence at the corner and along El Camino Real to make sure that there was a commercial feel to the development of the property. The project also includes in the glamping sites sort of a number of features that make this sort of a higher end resort development. They're trying to include some pond features with some units that extend over the ponds as part of their glamping sites. And then they have the glamping sites around the RV area as well. So when we adopted the 2020 changes to the specific plan, we adopted an overall design theme. And it included gable, shed and roof elements, kind of a contemporary agrarian design theme. There was a mix of metal, wood, and concrete that's required, earth tone colors, some geometric forms, layered facade elements. These were some of the conceptual images that were adopted as part of the specific plan and are sort of proposed for the annex development in particular, but were concept enough for us to include in the specific plan as a design theme. So this is the applicant's proposed conceptual commercial design. So they do have a lot of features consistent with the general plan or with the specific plan requirements. They have shed roof features, clear story windows. They do mix a lot of materials such as wood, concrete, metal, and glass. They do have enhanced glazing along the ground floor portions of the building, and they use geometric forms. So this is their concept architecture. As I stated before, they will have to come back when they've refined their architecture through DRC and Planning Commission for approval. But this shows general height and massing and design concept ideas. And then these are some of the concepts associated with the glamping portions of the site. So you can see in this image the sort of pond concept that they're trying to go for, as well as some sort of vintage VW buses, maybe some Airstream trailers. And then there's a potential for these more sort of permanent modular type cabin units that could be positioned on the site. I did want to mention there is also a request, and the resolution includes approval of a height exception. The current specific plan does allow heights up to 45 feet. 35 feet is our current standard in the commercial zone, but the specific plan did recognize the need for some additional height based on the types of uses that are allowed in the specific plan area. So a majority of the buildings are proposed at that 45-foot height. However, they do have some roof features, especially on the entertainment center, and they may have roof features on the mixed use building to provide variety and architectural interests that extend beyond the 45 feet. So we have included conditions that allow non-habitable space to go up to 55 feet to allow for that architectural interest. You can also see in some of these sections the slope of the site and how sort of the amphitheater is built into that slope, and the main commercial portion of the project will be at ground level with El Camino Real and sunken below the surrounding residential neighborhoods. This is just their preliminary landscape concept plan. We do expect refined landscaping to come in with their subsequent master plan of development applications. But they do have a focus on street trees along the streets and screening of the RV areas that's important to understand with this preliminary concept development. So in terms of affordable housing, there's kind of two components that we need to discuss. First off, the recently adopted housing element does list the housing site on this project as a RHNA site. So it is slated to meet our regional housing needs allocation. The new site is in fact slightly larger than the originally designated site, and so we can make findings to prove no net loss, which we are required to do by state law when we touch one of our RHNA housing sites. And in terms of affordable housing, the original specific plan did not include requirements for affordable housing because it was listed as our one of our RHNA sites. It is sort of a by right development site. We can include DRC review and recommendation, but we really can't say no if the project comes in and meets our current standards. However, this is a general plan amendment process and they are asking for some additional consideration. So through this process, the council can add affordable housing requirements to the project. As a reminder, our current policy has a breakdown of a certain percentage of units. It's 20% of the total number of units, and then the breakdown within that 20% requires 20% at a very low income, 37% at low, 43% at moderate. We do believe the applicants are intending to build these as affordable by design units. But the council can impose any additional affordability requirements on any portions of the project site. There's also the mixed use units that are part of the commercial portion of development. And so those can be sort of grouped together or looked at separately. So as Phil mentioned, the applicants are also requesting an interim temporary use of the site while they're developing their permanent portions. We haven't done a lot of analysis on this. They haven't submitted specifics of temporary use to us, but there are a couple of options if the council wishes to consider temporary uses on this particular site. Currently, we don't allow for temporary uses in our zoning code, and it's not allowed in the specific plan. So in order to allow interim uses, we would need to add language to the specific plan. With that language, we could add a number of requirements. It would potentially be available to all properties within the specific plan area if it's listed as an allowable use or conditionally allowable use. Our other option that we have tonight would be to delay action on any temporary uses. If we need more time to think about what language might want to be included in the specific plan to ensure that we're looking at it in a holistic way throughout the entire specific plan area. The council could direct staff and the applicant to come back at a later date with another specific plan amendment to include some greater specific details for interim use of the site. And then as a third option, we could add language to the specific plan and direct staff to develop a development agreement with the applicant. So through the development agreement process, there could be an opportunity for greater enforcement ability of the interim uses and sunset of those uses. And we're envisioning that this would be in addition to use permit approval still. Or the council can choose not to allow temporary uses on the site or within the specific plan area. If you did want to add language tonight, I believe we included some draft language in your staff report and it's up on the screen now. So in addition to requiring a conditional use permit, some of the draft language states that that conditional use permit would be reviewed at the city council level to ensure that council had final authority over those temporary interim uses. We've included language that the temporary uses be of a limited duration. The requested language, recommended language would be not to exceed 12 months. We also want to ensure that any applicant for interim uses are aware of the emergency access requirements as well as utility requirements associated with temporary and interim uses to ensure that they have adequate water lines for fire service and electrical for safety lighting. We can also add language about the need for aesthetics and landscaping, neighborhood compatibility, to look at site impacts throughout the use permit process. And guarantees might be required for site restoration if the temporary use disappears and they have not moved forward on their permanent uses yet. So the Planning Commission did recommend that City Council move forward with approval of the project. That includes adopting draft resolution A for the general plan map amendment. It also includes introduction for first reading of a draft ordinance approving the zoning map amendment and amendments to the commercial area specific plan. As noted, if the council wishes to include temporary interim uses, that language would need to be added. It's not currently in the draft specific plan language. I also wanted to note that our ordinance title did not get updated from Planning Commission. So there is a new title language there for you. And that is the language that Laura will read if you move forward with adoption of that draft ordinance. And then we have a draft resolution B, which does approve the overall master plan of development for the Del Rio Ranch project, and also establishes those uses listed as conditionally allowed uses so that the applicant has some ability to move forward with those uses. As I mentioned, we do have a couple of amendments to the conditions of approval. Condition of approval number 4 deals with the overall phasing of the project. Staff is recommending that instead of phase 1 and 2 being under construction prior to moving forward with the residential portion of the project, that phase 1 and 2 are substantially complete prior to moving forward with the residential portion of the project. Condition 100, letter C, there was an incorrect identification of the site as the northeast corner of El Camino Real and Del Rio. It is the southeast corner. And condition number 101 deals with the improvement phasing for the residential portion of development. We did want to specify, as it's specified in other conditions of approval, that Obispo Road is not going to be accepted for maintenance by the city until it is extended beyond the project boundary and serves additional sites to the south. And then D of that section, we wanted to specify for clarity that the on and off site improvements for phases 1, 2, and 3 shall be complete and accepted prior to occupancy of any residential unit. The original language just said the roads. So we wanted to change that for clarity. And that does conclude staff's presentation. Phil and I are available for any questions, and I'm sure the applicant is available and might have a presentation ready for you as well.
Thank you, Kelly. I would ask, just so the public understands tonight what we are doing and what we're not doing. We're not saying, we're not getting into details of, like you said, site distance at Del Rio, and is this done exactly the way it needs to be? We're not dealing with every single parking spot or where the trees are going and things like that. There's some conceptual things out there, but we're not getting into those details tonight. What we're really looking at, our understanding, is the moving of the residential to a different area, expanding that a little bit, which of course is the general plan amendment and the zoning change. We're approving some uses. Could you just talk about that a little bit in layman's terms? Because all the terms we use sometimes sound like, what are you doing tonight?
Yeah, so basically it's a large development site. There's going to be a lot of details associated with grading and actual development. They're going to be looking for tenants and users and operators of the site. But what they kind of need to have some comfortability moving forward is sort of an overall concept level plan that's kind of endorsed by the city for them to move forward on. So this plan kind of sets the tone for the location in general of land uses, and a couple conditions to ensure that the city has some authority over the aesthetics and the landscaping, so that they then understand how to move forward in the future. And then when they refine their plans, they will come back through another public process that will go both to Design Review Committee and to Planning Commission for approval. That will be 2 more publicly noticed hearings, and the Planning Commission will have authority to make any modifications or adjustments as needed once we understand the details of those plans. So this does not allow them to start construction on the site tomorrow. This sort of gives them an overall general approval that they can then refine and move forward on. And there'll be a couple other public review steps in between before they sort of start construction and have permanent occupancy of the site in any way.
Thank you for that. And why don't we go ahead and have the applicant do their presentation, because sometimes we have questions and then we're kind of going back and forth. So let's bring them on for their presentation and then we'll go to questions. Luca, is it Jack or Ted or who's going to be doing that this evening? Or Mike?
I'm not sure. Kelly, do you know who's doing the applicant presentation?
Yeah, Ted usually runs it if he's on, but if they could raise their hand.
Yeah, Ted, Mr. Lawton, if you could raise your hand, perfect.
Yeah, there we go.
Let's see, good evening, City Council, Mayor Moreno. Yeah, Kelly, Phil, great job tonight. Is there a way to be allowed to share my screen so I could bring the presentation up, please?
We'll make that happen.
Okay, let's see. All right. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Thank you so much. Good evening, City Council, city staff, and general public. We are so excited to be back here before the City Council. Again, it's a privilege to present our latest master plan of development for Del Rio Ranch. For the record, I'm Ted Lawton from Cal Coastal Communities. As you all know, we are a local family-owned real estate company. And again, I think it's important to share that a large portion of our team live, work, and own businesses here in Atascadero. In fact, we are here in Atascadero this evening, joined by Janie Kim and Tom O'Leary, and I know, and Jack Phelan, we're all listening, all present. And really, I think what's important is that we're all part of Atascadero, we're all part of North County, and that we also are happy to share our recent successes to date with the City Council authorization to proceed on March 23rd. We have the DRC review, a successful review on May 13th, and our full planning commission approval on June 1st. So why are we so excited about Del Rio Ranch? Well, because we know how much the city of Atascadero needs a placemaking commercial hub that can serve both as a local entertainment and recreational point of destination for local residents, as well as providing a staycation opportunity for the city and residents of Atascadero, while also providing a similar local attraction, such as the open air market in San Luis Obispo and the Paso Market Walk in Paso Robles. It is now time for Atascadero to transform from a commuter-based city to a desirable, vibrant destination, offering many opportunities for outdoor experiential living, dining, and shopping. In the industry, we call projects like these city makers, as they can truly anchor a city and give a city a real sense of identity and character. So some of the benefits that this project will bring is the fact that it will provide large indoor-outdoor entertainment centers and areas. It will add a variety of food, dining, and craft beverage options for the community to enjoy. It will provide many public gathering spaces, such as event center, amphitheater, open-air plazas, recreational parks, and opportunities for outdoor play. It will be fun, clean, a safe family atmosphere for all to enjoy. It'll be a staycation lodging attraction for the city of Atascadero, as well as provide a much needed large economic boost for the city regarding TOT, sales tax, new jobs, and of course, much needed housing inventory. So as a reminder, here's a quick summary of the project we're proposing. We are proposing approximately 109,000 square feet of commercial retail, 4.8 acres of recreational lodging and amenities, approximately a 300-person outdoor amphitheater, 48 residential mixed-use condos, and 3.6 acres of single-family homes. This project is going to be one of the largest commercial projects in the history of Atascadero. And as such, it will need to be broken down into smaller phases for management and financing purposes. We propose that phase 1 of the project will be our site cleanup, beautification, and short-term interim use. The site cleanup will occur in the green highlighted areas, as you can see here. And basically what we're doing is we want to get rid of a lot of the old debris, garbage, litter, foundation, cars, parts and pieces, dead trees all over the site. We want to do some tree maintenance as well, but the site has been neglected for at least a decade or more. And we think it's time to get it cleaned up. This process, we hope to start on July 1st and finish in September. Once it is complete, we are proposing the interim use and temporary lodging to occur in the green highlighted areas, while the phase 2 site permanent RV resort and commercial mixed use buildings are being prepped, ready for construction. So the green area, that's where we're proposing interim use. The yellow area is where we're proposing to do the permanent. And then as we progress through, that'll change. Upon completion of the permanent RV resort and the first mixed-use commercial building by August of 2022, we plan to move the interim lodging from the green highlighted area to the permanent RV resort lodging areas indicated by the large green arrow. So that way we can proceed and finish out the rest of phase 2. And it'll look like this. And these are the building types and renderings that we are proposing as the mixed use kind of retail condos along El Camino Real. So upon completion of the permanent RV resort and the first mixed use, sorry, there we are. Phase 2 will begin by January of 2022 with the building of the commercial areas along El Camino Real, as well as the permanent RV resort sites, also establishing site circulation, site access, and the required offsite improvements will be completed during this phase of the project. Please see the areas, sorry, jumped ahead, highlighted in yellow, which you can see here towards the bottom of the slide. Next, this slide represents the master plan of development, how it will look once phase 1 and 2 of the project are completed. At this time, all of the large commercial buildings along El Camino Real will be finished. And then we'll move on to phase 3. Phase 3 of the project will begin September of 2022, consisting of 3.8 acres of housing, single family housing located at the east side of the site along the top near Rio Rita Road as highlighted in red. This will provide a physical barrier, a sound buffer, and a visual screening for phase 4 of the project, which is the largest and most concentrated amount of development and construction on the site. Next, the 4 areas highlighted in red are the last and final phase, phase 4 of the project, which will begin in December of 2023 and will consist of the event center, hotel, parking garage, amphitheater, and then any of the final site improvements left for completion. So once that's completed, Del Rio Ranch will be the ideal setting for creating fun-filled, memorable experiences designed around a fun, safe family atmosphere. This has required our commercial lender to create a very strategic approach to financing and phasing of the project. It is critical for us to activate the project and project site upon receiving approval in order to receive $150 million in commercial financing during this post-pandemic, this challenging post-pandemic environment. Also, there are a lot of positive benefits that the site activation provides for the project, the residents of Atascadero, and the city. The immediate site activation will be the key to the success of our project. These benefits include, making sure we can meet our major financing requirements. It will introduce the project to the community. It allows the community to be a part of engagement activities with the residents and guests. It will produce TOT for the city right away. It'll provide additional recreational and activities for residents of Atascadero. It will allow our team to grow our operations and our vendor relationships. It will provide an interim use that also supports the master plan of development and zoning for the Del Rio specific plan, and will also allow the project to move at a quicker and faster pace for completion. There are numerous dry camping sites in local cities like Paso Robles, Morro Bay, Avila Beach, and the county of San Luis Obispo that currently allows for overnight dry camping. For example, there's a local winery in the city of Paso Robles that allows overnight dry camping for RVs. Please note, though, there are major differences between our proposed interim use and these other dry camping sites, as they do not provide any measures for dust control. There's no site stabilization or for entries and exits. There's no power, no water, no restrooms, no clear site demarcation, no on-site host, there's no security, there's no on-site lighting, there's no other amenities or other activities, which is in stark contrast to what we're proposing for our interim use. Our proposed interim use will provide much more than just a dry camping option, as it will include outdoor amenities, on-site activities, on-site specific activation program. It will include many pop-up vendors, added support services and facilities, a camp host, security personnel, stabilized entries and exits, dust control, on-site utilities such as water and power, restrooms, a clean-out station, and mobile site and detail services and cleaning. We're proposing to install a site very similar to these shown here, with lots of gravel, decomposed granite, drought-tolerant landscaping, and visual screening. So just in comparison, here's what we're doing compared to other sites, dry camping sites in the county. We are not going to do dry camping, but in fact, we're going to have a lot of amenities, a lot of services and facilities for our lodging guests to use. So some of the list of the amenities that we're seeking is native botanical gardens, a natural outdoor play area for kids, activities and arts and craft projects, potentially an archery range, maybe a BMX bicycle track for kids, commercial pop-up village, which I'll provide more details on here shortly, walking and riding trails, on-site hosts and guests, approximately 20 glamping sites, and approximately 40 RV lodging sites. So here's kind of an idea of what we would like to see, more of this natural outdoor use and playgrounds with rope swings and bicycles and balancing opportunities for kids to play on, rope swings, that sort of thing. And getting into the pop-up vendors, which we think is very critical to the site to, again, creating this draw and attraction. We would love to see a mobile library. One of my favorites is the book bus. A souvenir and gift shop, a mobile cafe bakery, mobile barbecue seafood pop-up, a beer and wine bar, a mobile flower shop, a mobile sushi bar, pop-up ice cream shop, gourmet sandwiches, charcuterie boards, maybe there's photo booths. Again, we want to make this very aesthetically pleasing because it will allow us for an opportunity to use other people's experiences through photos and social media to help promote the site. And that's critical for our site activation. Regarding site facilities, again, we want to have a formal check-in office. Again, it's a trailer, security station that's a trailer, a bathhouse trailer, restroom facilities that are shown here. Again, these are very nice facilities. These are all trailers. And in fact, this is my wife and I, we just experienced one last week down in San Diego at the San Diego Zoo, and the inside of it is just as nice as a hotel or a nice restaurant bathroom, as well as the shower facility, which it might be hard to see, but it's over here on the right. We want to have full trash enclosures and trash services. We want to have stabilized entrance rows and exits. We have picnic benches, tables, fire pits, Adirondack chairs, walking paths, very similar to what you see here. As well as we want to screen the site. So here's some concepts of site screening that we believe could really be beneficial to help promote the project, to give people an idea of a sense of what's coming with conceptual images and marketing. And I think it really gives the public, a really high level of awareness about what's happening. And it gives them time to, accept it. And then also here's an example up to the top left of a road that we could propose. It's a DG, gravel-based road that's very beautiful and I think helps with dust control. And finally, here's kind of a concept of what the interim use looks like, along El Camino and Del Rio. It's possible to put a lot of planting and a little path through here to really break it up from El Camino, to give our guests a sense of privacy, but also to give people on El Camino, passerbyers in Del Rio, some privacy and some screening about what's going on. Now, all in all, we believe even the interim use can be a very high quality, aesthetically pleasing experience for both passerbyers and guests. So, that moves me on to kind of what we talked about, I think, in the city staff report and in the city's planning departments.
Mr. Lawton, if I could pause you for a moment.
Yeah.
You've answered, I think, probably a lot of questions we had about interim use, and we still may have some more questions. We're probably a good close to 15 minutes in. So what I would like is if you could use the rest of your presentation to maybe not duplicate anything that staff did, but provide us some new information, and then we'll move on to questions.
Yeah, so I only have 2 slides left.
Perfect.
So it's like 2 or 3 minutes, if you don't mind.
That's just fine.
Yeah, so based on the city staff report, page 63, paragraph 4, the city's legal counsel has confirmed that conditions of approval for an interim use could be established, including an option for a sunset clause. Also, the City Planning Commission unanimously recommended approving the interim use 5-0 on June 1st. As such, our team is kindly asking the City Council for approval this evening of the Del Rio Master Plan of Development and/or approval of the Master Plan of Development with a recommendation to approve the interim use, with city staff added interim use conditions to the conditional use permit to satisfaction of the city's legal counsel. We are fully committed to making this city maker project a reality and are asking for the support of city council and staff to help make this project possible for everyone living here in Atascadero. We want the future of Atascadero to be bright and prosperous for all. This project will do exactly that. I thank you for your time and consideration of our requests, and would be more than willing to help answer any questions the council or city staff has at the moment. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. I will say that bathroom you showed is nicer than my guest bathroom here, so that was pretty impressive. So I'm going to ask council, what I would like to do is let's first ask questions related to everything but the interim uses. So let's kind of get that nailed down. And then let's ask the questions about the interim uses, separate that just slightly. So if we go just based on the staff report minus interim uses, what questions do you have of either staff or the applicant? Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
My question is of staff. What is our precedent for allowing interim uses on developments such as this?
There isn't really a precedent for that. We don't have it in our municipal code, and we don't have that in our specific plan. And so I think that's the topic of discussion that I think staff's been struggling with. When we deal with interim uses, we typically are dealing with special events. Like when we have a special event, it might set up in a location like if a circus comes to town, or if we have a skating rink that comes to town during winter. Those are special events. They aren't really interim uses. This is a much longer, much more established use. So it's a different kind of thing. It's something that we could recognize in the specific plan, and that's some draft language that Kelly showed to you in a presentation. But we don't have a history of a true interim use. So it's kind of a new thing that we're looking at this evening.
So apparently we're not waiting on interim use conversation, and we're just doing it all. So. Forget what I said 2 minutes ago.
I should have stopped you, Heather. Sorry.
It's all right.
I went ahead and answered it.
Councilmember
Sure, thanks. I do have some questions that do not relate to interim use, as well as some that do. Let me start on page 62 of the staff report. Item 1 in the middle, there's a mention that there was be condition for an open space easement on the property. Could you pull up the map and just point to where that is? Okay, so the upper left-hand corner of the screen is where I see the thing.
Yes, and one of
okay.
the reasons for that is because that area will be zoned residential, even though it's not requested for residential development, but just based on our zoning lines and where those need to occur. So we wanted to make it really clear that that acreage was not included in their residential density calculation, and their residential was just included for the portion that they show on their master plan of development.
Okay, and that would presumably help some of the sightline issues with traffic.
Yes, it could, and it's also proposed as a stormwater detention basin, so there will be some grading and recontouring potentially of that area.
Okay. As the floating phase 4, where is the parking structure going to get built in the sequencing of it? And how will parking be handled prior to the development of that structure? That's been an issue that's been a concern to other businesses in the area.
Definitely. So the applicants are including the parking structure in their last phase of development. The conditions of approval, however, in the resolution require that they meet the minimum parking standards for each phase of development, whether that be through a surface parking lot where the parking structure is going to be, or whether that actually triggers construction of the parking structure in a prior phase. We have required that they do meet their parking requirement for each phase of development.
Okay, that handles that. On page 65, there was a question that, well, I guess it's about temporary use, so I'll come back to that. And then I want to ask a little bit about the circulation issues and their plans that are addressed on page 66 of the staff report. Let's start with, there's a mention that a traffic circle is planned at the RV site entrance. Could you clarify what that is?
Sure. So it's in this location here. And what we've tried to do is make this connection here as straightforward as possible if the residents do use it as a sort of secondary connection. And so we wanted to make sure there were no sort of abrupt stops needed at this intersection in order for ease of use. So there is a traffic circle here that will accommodate that intersection.
Is that going to be big enough to handle RVs? I mean, some of those are pretty large.
Yeah, it's a pretty small traffic circle, and what we've talked about and we'll obviously get to as we refine the master plan of development is that some of them are actually mountable, and so the RVs would potentially be able to kind of go up and over that traffic circle as it was safe when there's other cars in the area, but majority of vehicles would follow the sort of standard roundabout pattern.
Okay. There's a mention here that there are two entrances on Del Rio Road. One is the one up at Obispo, and then the lower one is designated as the principal commercial ingress. Which locations will allow left turns?
Sure. So as the traffic analysis to date does believe that this can be a non-restricted access point. So it would allow for left turns, right turns, left turns in as well. So that would be unrestricted. And then this signalized intersection would be unrestricted with movements. So that would allow left turns in and left turns out as well. The only restriction that we're looking at based on further site distance analysis is left turns out of Obispo Road.
Right. So unless it's physically, if that's the easiest way out of the residential area, people will be making left turns there unless it is physically impossible to do so, because water flows downhill. But would it be possible to route that left turning traffic through the development to I'm pointing on my screen to the corner of the convention center over there, so that people wanting to turn left would come through that narrower street and make a left turn at the entrance designated the principal commercial ingress?
Yeah, none of the streets will be gated off or restricted to any of the traffic through the area, so that would be allowed to occur.
It's also possible that the Obispo Road left turn could be possible. That is going to require some additional work. It might require some additional grading to remove some slope and changing that curve on Del Rio. We don't know if that's an option yet. So we're essentially saying that as it's designed right now, it may not allow for left turns, but it could be with further study, they could still allow left turns. So we're looking at that option as being an option as well. So I wouldn't take that off the table entirely as being something that can happen. But if it can't happen, there's certainly options for them to go through this project area on these internal streets at either one of the points, whether it's El Camino or the further west area on Del Rio for that driveway.
Okay, this was a point of discussion at design review as well, and it will be important to allow for that traffic because most of the traffic is going to want to go that direction unless they're dropping kids off at San Benito or working on Traffic Way. Then in the flipping to the page 175, I think you may have addressed this in recommendations, but in the project phasing in the actual language of the conditions, it just mentions that construction of the multifamily residential portion of the project may not commence until the RV resort and commercial center have been issued building permits and are under construction. I understand, is this the language, the spot where you're expecting to amend that to say substantial completion of those?
Yes, yeah, I think Kelly proposed some change language there that basically said substantially completed. So that is a suggestion by staff this evening.
Okay, that would take care of that issue. Okay, the rest of my questions pertain to the temporary uses, so I will defer.
Any other questions of staff or the applicant on non-interim? Councilmember Borbo, followed by Councilmember Darris.
Yes, thank you. Kelly, on the affordable housing issue you raised in your presentation, you indicated that, the current requirement under the specific plan is 0. And you mentioned that, if this was a brand new proposal, not within a specific plan, what I'll call the normal requirements of city policy would apply. How many units would that be under the city's policy?
Yeah, so it's 20% of the total units on site. Because we're kind of in a conceptual phase, we don't exactly know how many units they're proposing. So if you wanted to do an affordable housing requirement, I would recommend staying with percentages.
Okay,
but I mean,
ballpark, it's 80 units total?
On the back portion of the site.
Right.
And then there's more units on the mixed use portion.
Oh, right, there's more, okay, gotcha, okay. And then, okay. But being that the current requirement in this specific plan area is 0, the council could essentially elect to require anything between 0 and 20%.
Correct.
And we could choose whatever percentages in there. I mean, the normal policy you outlined, the 20, the 43% and the 37%, I think. But we could choose any number within there, correct? And
Yes.
we could focus solely on very low income or something like that, if that's what we wanted, if we're a small number of units or something like that.
Yes, I believe that you did that on something similar on the principal project.
Right. But in this case, it seems like we have a lot of latitude because the current requirement is 0.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And then you had a slide on phasing. And I will have some questions about the interim, but avoiding that. Okay. What I wanted to make sure I understand is the in the overall scheme of things, the phase 2, the commercial center. I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. Did you have a second slide on this that showed phasing? No. Okay. Yeah, here it was. Conference facility, hotel, and amphitheater can be built with any phase on this slide. So is that to say then that the elements of the commercial part of this project, that those are not phase 2, those could be in any phase, and that the ones that are required, in phase 2 before residential are
the mixed buildings and the entertainment center.
Mixed use and the entertainment center. Not okay. So really, phase 2 being commercial is really only about half of the commercial phase, or some portion.
Correct. Yeah, it would be sort of all of the on-site road systems, but in terms of building mass, maybe a little bit more than half. But
and were these commercial facilities that were kind of required in phase 2 versus these that can be left till later? Was that what was requested by the applicant, or is that was recommended by staff, or how was that arrived at?
yeah, it has been part of the applicant's request. We see a couple of these uses, like we know hotels generally need operators, and so they generally kind of come when they can. Similar with the amphitheater, there's a lot of pieces that go into an amphitheater and sound system, and coming back for review and approval to make sure that there's not a lot of neighborhood impacts, and doing acoustical studies. And then the conference facility is kind of normally based on demand. So it has been the applicant's request, but we've also see that some of these uses generally need sort of outside factors in order to move forward.
Right, but these are also, I would say, some of the most, from a community development perspective, a community amenity perspective, some of the most desired aspects of the project, correct? Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, I mean, yeah, aside from the entertainment portion of the, definitely the amphitheater and some of those outdoor use and community-based areas are key components.
Right. Okay, because I understand, you know, the applicant needs to be able to develop this in a financially feasible way. And perhaps these things either, you know, A, take more time. My concern is, you know, their long-term viability, or and that we don't end up with a half-finished commercial portion of this project. And I wonder about whether or not, you know, because everybody knows that a developer, especially in this day and age, you know, any residential you build, you can sell or rent profitably. And so it's very, of course, you know, that's very important to the applicant to develop that stuff. But knowing that, I'm wondering whether you can condition, and I'm just throwing this out, thinking out loud, I'm not saying this is what I'd want to do, but could we condition the multifamily in phases to say, well, you know, you can build half the multifamily, but then you got to build one of these other desirable amenities.
Yeah, you definitely have the authority to condition that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I do have some questions on interim uses regarding the applicant's presentation that I'll save for later. Thank you.
Councilmember Darrows.
Thank you. Most of my questions were kind of answered through all that, but just a couple. I know we're still in the conceptual phase on this, Kelly, and you mentioned approximately 80 units of the residential. I think I saw in the staff report part of a breakdown. That's why my question is, what is the breakdown of the type of units? I saw 48 condos and then some single family, but I didn't see a number. I wonder, has that been discussed? Have they proposed how they want to do that, or what will be the breakdown of the type of units that'll be in here?
Yeah, so the residential definitely kind of has not been designed yet. We actually have a minimum density on our high density residential properties, and so they will be required to meet a certain minimum number of units. That might push them towards an attached type product, something like a townhome for that portion of the residential, just by the nature of our density requirements. So that hasn't been designed yet, and we don't really know, but we do expect that they are anticipating, whether they're attached townhomes or detached units, to subdivide them and allow them to be ownership units on lots in that portion of the development. Based sort of on their project summary on their design plan set, they have about 21 units in the mixed use portion of the development. So those are on the second and third floor of those mixed use buildings. And those would be sort of a more rental product unless there was a condo map done, and then they would be for sale airspace units.
Okay, so that number of 80 units that I saw, it includes the ones over the retail. It's not just.
I believe that 82 units is the maximum density of the residentially zoned portion, and then the 21 units would be on the commercial portion in addition to.
Okay, that's what I thought. I guess my concern, I look at that 80 units on 3.6 acres, I see it's pretty dense and tall, and parking. I'm always concerned about parking, but I know we're early in that, so I'm not going to concern myself with it now. I'm sure they'll figure it out, and we'll iron that out when the time comes.
Yeah.
And then one real basic question, just kind of thrown out there. A lot of thought went into this plan and what they're proposing for this, and it occurred to me that in the whole RV lodging area and any of this, even the hotel, again, unless we're too early in the conceptual stage, I don't see a swimming pool. Is there a reason why there's no pool, or is it just hasn't been thrown in there yet?
Yeah, so I believe this actually darker blue attached to the hotel is.
Oh, it is right there. Okay.
To kind of be a pool area. And I believe based on their sort of vision and concept is that the RV users would be able to use the hotel amenities. It would kind of be run as one resort style area.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Kelly, on page 177, number 17, it talks about the existing CFD that's on there. And it also says that, should the maintenance CFD be extinguished and a map be recorded that allows for multiple parcels, a maintenance agreement that defines responsibilities of property owners shall be required to record prior to or concurrently with the map recordation. Is there a benefit to having a CFD? When I think of a CFD, I always think it's a lot of time, therefore money on everyone's part for the city to maintain a CFD. So is there a benefit that outweighs that we would want to keep this in here? Or is there the potential of us looking at saying, hey, let's get rid of that and have there be the maintenance agreement?
Sure. I don't believe that there's a benefit to having the CFD. I know they take a lot to administer, and they generally cost more for the owner or applicant of the development because they're paying sort of city costs to do that level of work. I'm not sure if we would see a benefit if this property were chopped up into a lot of different lots and then there were 10 different owners that had to participate in maintenance. From an enforcement standpoint, it might be a little bit harder than the city doing it, but there's certainly a large cost component associated with the city administering those facilities districts. I have some communication out to our CFD consultant just to make sure that we, if we wanted to mandate that they get rid of that CFD, that we can do that. I hope to hear back from her shortly so that we can answer that question. But in terms of a benefit, I don't know that there's an extreme benefit to maintaining that.
So if that's something we wanted to look at tonight, would we need to actually include that as part of our motion if we all came to an agreement on that? Or is that something we could all just say, hey, check with the consultant if it, like I would hate for us to mandate something and you get to the consultant and the consultant says, oh, no, and here's why.
Yeah, I think that you could modify the condition that says, eliminate the CFD and enact a private maintenance agreement, unless, determined infeasible, for legal reasons or something of that nature.
So maybe that's just sort of a heads up to our city attorney and maybe city clerk if you want to be thinking of some language for later this evening.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor, on that issue, I mean, I had a question about the existing CFD, which I recalled was we created for the Walmart project. And I understood from Mr. Dunsmore and Rochelle that, you know, that was created for the maintenance, not of these internal streets, but of the improvements along Del Rio and El Camino. And therefore it wasn't like one of these little districts, you know, neighborhood districts that we create, if you will, but it was for the maintenance of those public improvements. And therefore it would be more substantial. And essentially it was like, okay, Walmart, you're going to improve these things and you're going to maintain them as opposed to the city maintaining them. So I don't think it's just like one of those neighborhood type assessment things that are too small, don't generate enough money, cost more because they're administered at government prices, that sort of thing. So I don't know if Phil or if you or Rochelle could comment on that.
No matter the size, no matter the size of the district, the amount of administration that you have to go through is very, very similar. And so, yes, there is a substantial administrative burden to have a CFD, and that cost would be passed on to those properties that are assessed in the CFD. So that is the same. But yes, it's my understanding that the CFD covers all of the public improvements, which are the responsibility of the adjacent property owners under our Muni Code.
I did just want to interject
So
back from the consultant that we do have legal authority to cancel the CFD. We would just record a notice of cancellation to do that.
But then how would the private property owner then be, you could still make them responsible for maintaining the median in the middle of El Camino? Because that's
through conditions of approval, we could require that they maintain the median landscaping, any median landscaping. The improvements from the original Walmart CFD approval have been modified. It also included the roundabout and all of the landscaping in the roundabout, in addition to street trees and median landscaping. So this proposal with our new plan line setback does have a much smaller maintenance area, as it doesn't have a large roundabout with landscaping to maintain, and may not have the same level of medians, but still does have that component to a certain degree.
As long as you can require them to maintain out in the public area, because that's what the CFD did, was require them to take on the expense of maintaining those public improvements. As long as you can do that without the CFD, then I think the mayor's got a great point.
Yeah, and that would be critical. It does need to be maintained, but if we don't need to involve ourselves in it, and actually, I mean, that just creates work that we really don't have capacity to do, and then it makes it more expensive for the developer and ultimately the property owners, whoever that might be in the future. So maybe just be thinking about that, staff, in the background, how that might work as we're talking about this later. And then one other question I have, Kelly, is on page 194. And so this relates to, mitigating measures that came from the EIR, but as you read through some of these, they don't make a lot of sense for this project. So for example, this is at the tail bottom of 193, it's the mitigating measure AIR 2F. And it talks about this whole transportation demand program and, employer sponsored van pooling and incentives for, no single occupant vehicle, all of these things that make sense if you've got Walmart there. But we don't have one big employer for this whole site. So this seems like kind of an odd, Phil, you're muted. It looks like you're maybe trying to talk. Okay. And so it seems a little odd to be there. And I don't know if it's just something that has to stay there, but if it does have to stay there, does this actually apply to each and every employer that could potentially be there? What do we do with something like this?
Yeah, and maybe Phil can weigh in. We're not proposing sort of an addendum to the EIR, and we haven't sort of analyzed, we haven't gone back out to the air district to see if we can modify sort of what they submitted to us in terms of mitigating impacts. So, you know, I would say to be safe, it kind of stays there, but certainly, you know, they could submit something to APCD, and APCD could submit us a letter or an email back saying, oh, based on the changes of use, you know, this is no longer a requirement. It doesn't provide, you know, mitigation for anything based on the scale of uses. So I would be hesitant to take it out or modify it.
Right.
We're not really touching that, but
oh, I understand that, but that gives me, that lets me know what could be done going forward. You're saying the applicant could apply to APCD and say, you know, look, we've got multiple employers. This is a project that's different, and it wouldn't make sense because for them to do this TDM and reporting and all of this, again, when you could have many, many employers on site, just doesn't make a ton of sense. Okay, great. That was all my questions on that. So let's move to the interim uses. I think everybody had questions. Mayor Pro Tem Newsom has had her, did you have any other questions on interim uses?
I'm gonna pass. You said don't, and I did the child mentality and said, let's do it.
You're like, whatever. All right, let me go in reverse order now. We'll go Councilmember Darroz.
Yeah, I'll pass and come back. You can come back to me.
All right, Councilmember Bourbeau.
Yes, on the interim uses, I don't know if we can get the applicant's presentation back up there. Had some questions about that. About what they.
If you're still on, maybe if you could bring up your slides relating to interim uses.
I'm happy to. I think I just need to have the screen share.
Well, while he sets that up, I'll ask a question of staff. Phil, you mentioned not really having a precedent other than like special events. You did mention the skating rink, which is what came to my mind when we talk about interim uses. You know, we had the skating rink in the middle of downtown, and I know there were some issues with that in terms of allowing it to stay up longer than originally anticipated, that sort of thing. And I wasn't on the council then. I don't remember, you know, what how that was dealt with, but it seemed to be a precedent, not a precedent without issue. I just wonder, in terms of allowing interim uses, as long as they're conditioned to, you know, like dust control and all that kind of stuff, if they're on dirt. Have there been any other examples besides the skating rink where we have allowed an interim use on a piece of property?
I suppose there was one that was sort of an event center that was north of Del Rio on a property between El Camino and the freeway.
Okay.
Where again, it was done as a special event, but then it prolonged and we started to look at it as an interim use, but they were never able to complete the improvements necessary to support the interim use. So it sort of just faded away after a while. If you might recall the temporary event center that was there on a property just north of Del Rio.
I do. I recall that now that you mention it. Okay. And I guess, you know, you sort of address, I guess, but just what kind of condition, I assume that a whole host of conditions could be imposed on the interim use, but but if in the end, you know, it's getting prolonged or it's problematic, enforcement measures for shutting down an interim use. I want to make sure that we wouldn't be limited to sending them a series of, oh, please, you know, stop what you're doing letters that we sometimes, you know, have situations of that there would, you know, if we were to go that direction, that there would be some more teeth in whatever conditions we applied that said, yeah, you can have your interim use, but here's the, you know, a hard deadline that can only be modified, only be amended with further council action or something. So I assume that there's a whole host of conditions that could be implied with real teeth in it.
Sometimes it's stronger to have an actual development agreement. Also, you could have a condition that requires them to post a bond or a guarantee so that we have some hook to really make sure that there is a time limit and that there's site restoration if that temporary use ceases and are not able to clean up the site and move the pieces into there.
Thank
Also,
you.
what's important to note is that I think some of the slides you saw tonight, staff hasn't seen those yet. I think the applicant shared with you some concepts from the interim use plan. We haven't had a chance to review that or see that. And so that's the whole idea of, if we do want to even look at this interim use, we're going to need more time to look at it and really apply specific conditions. So I think it's important to note that, you know, if there is interest in seeing this interim use, we've really got to possibly open the door and then kick these details down the road a little bit. But we certainly can apply some very specific conditions, even development agreement or even a bond or other surety, to ensure we can enforce those conditions.
Right. And along those lines, if I understood you correctly in the staff report, that if the council conceptually agreed that some interim use might be allowable, that you would essentially have to come back and essentially we'd have a separate meeting where we talked about the details of those interim uses or the conditions on those interim uses.
That's right.
Right. So we don't actually need to get too deep in the weeds as to the specific interim uses then.
No, we just need to
Okay.
get a general idea and concept. Hey, if there's support to go that way, here's what we can do in a specific plan to recognize it, put some general parameters, but know that more specific parameters will have to come later.
Okay. Well, if we could have the applicant, now that he has his presentation up, if he could go to the first slide where we talked about doing something interim, and I think it reflected a date of January 22 on there. And in light of what you just said and reiterated, I may actually not have many questions, and maybe we'll just, you know, wait down the road. But I did want to look at that. So I think I do have one question. I think it's, you know, it's near the end. Okay, here you go. Between these two slides, the first one, if you go back one slide, and it says interim use phase 1, July, you know, which is essentially a week from now, more or less. You know, start cleaning stuff up. There's old foundations, things like that were mentioned. But then the next slide says begin January 22. So this would be to begin work on permanent aspects of the RV resort. And then I was looking at when they would look at phasing out the temporary uses. Is that on the next slide?
August 2022.
Okay, so that is essentially a little over a year from now. That essentially, you know, the RV resort would be far enough along that it would become viable as a revenue generator, and you would shut down the interim use. Is that what you're identifying?
Yes, that is correct. You know, obviously this is all subject to permitting and engineering. I mean, there is an extensive list of conditions which we're going to work very diligently at complying and satisfying. But I mean, we would like to see it happen in August of 2022. That is our plan as of now.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So without getting into the details of the interim use, when would you have the interim use up and running? Is it at the January 22, or is that when you would just start the permanent use?
I mean, I think that's
building.
I mean, ideally we would have it, you know, within the next, you know, 90 days. Again, it all depends on what comes back when your planning department does their study and makes their recommendations. You know, depending on what those recommendations are, they're going to affect the timeline of how quick we can get started. I mean, for us, we want it to be as soon as possible, but at the same time, I think the city, your planning staff wants to be mindful of how we do it and to make sure that, you know, certain things are done. For example, utilities, fire, water, stabilized entrances. I mean, there are some improvements that need to happen prior, and there's some engineering and there's some other work that's going to need to take place in order to satisfy the planning department and building department with respect, and fire department with respect to being able to occupy the site.
Right. And I think in all of our experience, these things take longer than one initially expects. And that I just want to be concerned, or without getting into too many specifics, that, you know, you got to be realistic about timing on this stuff. And I'll leave it at that. And Mayor, my computer's telling me my connection is unstable. Some of Mr. Lawton's comments went into echo chamber for me. So you might lose me, but briefly. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
And I love that you drilled down and said we don't need to get into the details. So I love that, Marbo. So yeah, if we could kind of keep conceptually, I think that is good advice. Councilmember Funk, I saw your hand.
Yes. So with regard to the temporary uses, staying with this slide for right now, how are the RVs going to come in and out of the site under the temporary uses? I'm concerned with the safety of turning movements, both for the folks in those RVs and for folks in our community driving down El Camino Real and elsewhere.
So I think this is a question for me.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just for some reason, my slide is frozen. But what we plan on doing is having a right in off of Del Rio with a right out on El Camino. And so unfortunately my slide's not changing, but the idea is you'd come in down here, if you could see my cursor, you'd come down here and you'd exit out here. So it'd be a right in with a right out. So that way you're never crossing traffic. And all of our instructions will be very clearly marked. We'll have signage, and we'll make sure that when people make reservations that they're very aware of that requirement.
Okay, so you would be planning on doing that and not doing the turning lanes on El Camino Real or the signalized intersection or any of that development in this initial period.
That is correct. However, we will be working towards that. I wish I could toggle through where we can show you the reason why we're doing it the way we are is because it allows us to separate the two uses from happening. We have a permanent construction, which is going to be happening to the right of the site, and we're going to have the interim to the left, and then we're going to swap the interim into permanent and then build out into that, where the interim sites were. We're going to build a permanent commercial. And it's a matter of sequencing in order to do it to make sure everybody's safe. For us, we don't want to have, anybody crossing. We don't want construction workers crossing. We don't want our guests crossing. And so to have a very clear line demarcation with fencing, physical barriers to make sure that does not occur. And we will have a right in from Del Rio with a right out onto El Camino.
Okay. Next question is for staff. One of in thinking of carrots and sticks, one of the incentives that we use as a stick to enforce things is that we don't allow occupancy permits until certain criteria are met. Is that an applicable concept with an RV resort? Does it get an occupancy permit?
Absolutely, yes. There's certainly, for any project, they're going to have to do construction. They're going to have to do sewer hookups, water hookups. They're going to have to do all kinds of things that support the project. There would be an occupancy. Certainly, it's not just parking RVs on this site. It is a construction project. It comes along with the roads, the improvements, all of these things that support it. And those have to be completed so that we know we have the right fire access. We know we have the right fire suppression. We know we have the water supply and the wastewater supply for the site, the restrooms to support. All of those things are components that have to get occupancy.
Okay. So that's a lever in this process that staff could use in negotiating the interim uses if needed. Okay. I already asked about the parking. Oops, wrong set of notes. I was not. Could the applicant define dry camping?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Susan. So dry camping is when there are no utilities available for the site. We're proposing that there will be utilities for the sites. It's a big differential. because a lot of people who have RVs want to connect. And we can do it very easily, run temporary power, run temporary water, you put in a 4x4 post, everything's mounted to the post. You know, you have a marine grade, you know, watertight electrical connection junction box, very similar to ones that you see on the outside of your house with covers. And then the water literally, it's just like a traditional water spigot, very easy to do.
Okay. And this, I hear that you want this. I'm having a hard time seeing how the level of site improvements it takes to have this be a attractive resort opportunity from the get-go, you know, with, you know, the little play area that you showed and, you know, those kinds of amenities and the, you know, the infrastructure amenities you just described. How does this pencil out if you're going to then need to abandon a fair number of those because you're going to be building other structures in that area? Does this really pencil out for you to do this interim use?
Yes, Susan, it does. Really, what we're doing is a glorified landscaping project. I mean, that's really all it is, to be honest with you, because everything else, everything's pulled in on wheels. It's all trailer based. It's very easy to do. We can get it up and running very quickly. For us, it's super important because, you know, our purchase price on this acquisition is not cheap. It is a large monthly carrying cost. And quite frankly, our lender is requiring to see some sort of income generation happening as soon as possible for us to carry the note. So it is absolutely critical for the success of the project. Plus, we see it as a really amazing opportunity to be able to engage with the community, to be able to engage with our guests and share with them our vision of what's coming, and also solicit feedback about maybe there's some other things that they'd want to see included that we haven't done. And so activating the site, bringing people on site, cleaning it up, making it beautiful, and for everybody in Atascadero to really be able to come and enjoy is important to us. And I think the faster we activate the site, the better it is for everyone. It's better for people to get used to the fact that this site is going to be used. And it's a way to allow people to transition from a smaller development into a larger development. There's so many positive reasons why it makes a lot of sense to start activating now as opposed to just letting it sit, because it is going to take a little while to make all these connections and do all the engineering. And I mean, there are still a lot of, I mean, there's over 100, you know, there's 100 conditions that are going to need to be met. So, you know, this is a large project and it's going to take some creativity, at least on our part, to make this thing successful.
Okay, and you could do some kind of surface, like a DG or something that the RVs are going to be going over for some, you know, dirt that's not well vegetated and presumably won't be irrigated.
And I think that will be,
they'll manage dust control. You're going to have a way to do that.
That will be something that will be in the agreement. So I know these are some things I think that will happen in the future if we're kind of agreeing conceptually. That has been written. So the things that you're concerned about, I think that we're all concerned about, will be taken care of through potentially a development agreement or something else. So
sure. And I have one more question with that. Is whether or not that development agreement on phase 1 could include doing the plantings along El Camino Real, in particular in that section of the property, so that the plantings themselves can be a significant portion of the screening, as opposed to having a massive temporary fence, site-wide sidewalk facing. I know it takes time for stuff to grow in, but is that a feasible element of the plan?
Yes, for us, we believe we'd like to get things, both permanent and non-permanent landscaping installed as soon as possible. I mean, that's part of the reason why we want to start, you know, July 1st, you know, if we can work with the city to allow it, to start cleaning up the site, because it'll allow us to come in and do some of these permanent plantings and even do some of these temporary landscape plantings to create the screening, to create the atmosphere that we're looking to have happen on the site, especially with landscaping. We all know that the sooner you do it, the better, because it does take a little time to fill in and grow. But this is kind of that idea, Susan, that I think you're talking about, is getting this landscaping installed along El Camino and Del Rio. And we'd like to leave a majority of it as possible, especially this, like this walking path that you see kind of wrapping around Del Rio and El Camino. Those are critical pieces to this being a success.
Okay, thank you. When we get through our discussion process after we've heard our public comment, I'll check back with staff. We'll come back to detail and say if staff has enough guidance on parameters and issues to be able to negotiate an agreement on this.
Sounds good.
And defer anything else to this point.
Are there any other council questions that you believe are necessary at this point regarding interim use? All right, seeing none, what I'd like us to do is take a break and then we will come back and open up for public comment. So I see 8:16. Why don't we come back at 8:25? See you then. think we can come on back. Can someone say something so I know my speakers are working?
I'm tired.
Oh, good.
Been up since 2 a.m.
You all sound great.
Excellent. All right. And I'll wait for a couple more of us to come on and we will go to public comment. All right, and Mark, if you are here, I'm sure you are, come on the screen. All right. Councilmember Darrett, there you are. All right. So we are now opening up to public comment for item B1 on the Del Rio Ranch project. And I will look to the hands raised in the webinar. We'll start there. We'll start with Mr. Michael Manchek, followed by, you think I was the one up since 2 a.m., Mr. Fred Monroe.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Fantastic. Good evening. My name is Mike Manchak. Hello, Mayor Moreno and members of the council. I want to thank you for this opportunity to make public comment on this really important project, which I think is going to make a huge difference, a positive difference in the city of Atascadero. As a North County resident for many years, I'm excited to be working with Cal Coastal Communities, a local company that is creating amenities in the city, such as housing, entertainment, and retail. This project being presented, Del Rio Ranch, is a solid example that includes all three elements. For many years, I led the economic development organization countywide that helped businesses and local government, is specifically in Atascadero, actually. And I have a unique perspective on Atascadero's economy and the ways to address its challenges. I learned a lot about Atascadero's economy over the years in working with its businesses and city staff. In this work, we help the community and the city measure, understand, and plan our economy and establish ways to grow businesses and jobs as well. As Atascadero continues to address its jobs, housing, and balance, something that is often talked about, it is especially important to help businesses recover from the impacts of COVID-19, as well as dealing with the shortage of more affordable housing and the need for more head of household jobs. These challenges may cause residents to not be able to work in the city they call home, which is very unfortunate, work far distances, and then even we are losing some residents because of a lack of higher wage jobs, all while the cost of housing rises significantly. So creating more jobs in the community is very important for both the city, businesses, and residents. Fewer jobs and amenities means fewer taxes collected. This means fewer resources for vital community services. So what's the solution? It's really about creating and attracting more business, encouraging more affordable workforce housing, and fostering more community amenities, all in a place where people want to live, spend time in, and invest in. So approximately 2 years ago, we did a survey of businesses in and outside of the city. And in order to really accomplish growth of jobs, they all said the same thing virtually, which was the city needs more amenities, more eating options, and more affordable housing. So let's create reasons for residents and visitors to spend their dollars in Atascadero to help the city become more competitive. It is projects like this that will help to address challenges facing the city's economy and diversifying it by creating more entertainment, shopping, lodging, ultimately a larger tax base, and more housing. So lastly, this project would create many jobs and increase funds to the city by approximately $2 million every year at full build out. The company's projects will have a positive impact to address local challenges, the need for more entertainment options and visitors and residents, And it will help Atascadero really be more competitive, as it will serve the needs of the community and everyone around it. The project is really a win-win-win as I see it. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. I did allow you to go a little bit over, so I'm going to ask everybody to keep within that 3 minutes. Otherwise, I will at some point come in and, and ask you to finish up. But thank you very much for your comments. You did not go that over. Mr. Fred Monroe.
Unmute myself. Sorry about that.
Okay. No worries. We can hear you just fine.
Okay. I'm Fred Monroe. I live at 4150 Del Rio Road, which is exactly 1 mile east of this site. I want to preface this by saying I do not have any connection to the developer or this project. And I want to start with that because I'm afraid you might think that's what's happening based upon how delighted I am to see this project go forward. I've watched that corner. I drive by it every day. I have lived in the residence I live in right now since 2005. We have basically seen nothing happen there. I was glad that Walmart did not go in, frankly, but I was very concerned that it was just going to sit as a dumping ground for trash and a lot of debris for a long time. I think what they are planning to do with this project is probably the best use of the property. It comes to mind for me, there's a site in Cambria, probably not Cambria, Carmel on Highway 1 and Carmel Valley Road called the Barnyard, which was built about 30 years ago, which uses about the same kind of open space and spread out building that this is looking at. And when you add the RV element into this, I think it becomes a very good project. I'm only concerned about a couple of things that I could consider minor concerns. And that is, if there's going to be a phased interim use on the front end of this project, I'm very concerned about the quality of current roadbed and improvements on Del Rio Road. So I want to know how much staff can do to make sure those improvements are indeed done on the front end of this project, or we end up with a very torn up road for a very long time while it's going on. I think the timeline that they're looking at is terrific. Frankly, their interim use, in my opinion, is something that I wish someone had done there 10 years ago. So we could have been looking at that kind of RV use by people visiting the area and glad to be here, as opposed to looking at dirt and torn up foundations that have just been left for a very long time. I am concerned that that phase 4, the part that would include the amphitheater and the conference use or entertainment portion of this, what do we do if the developer basically runs out of money or doesn't have the tenants to use that use? If it's phase 4, we could end up with a portion of this project in the middle of the project that never gets developed. And then I'll leave you with the fact that as long as the developer will give us an idea of what the timeline is and keep the community well aware of that timeline, I think this is a tremendously good project for the area. I would rather drive by this every day than 90% of what I drive by in this county on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. If there's anyone else in the webinar that would like to speak, please raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you can press *9. Mr. Jeff Oslin.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to reiterate what I said last time this was brought to Council. This is a phenomenal project for the city of Atascadero in all phases, and granting them an interim use to do RVs right away is fantastic. It will bring us more TOT tax. It will bring us more business to town, more people going out to restaurants down in our downtown, more people shopping within the city, more gas or diesel being purchased, which is tax revenue. We need to approve this interim use. We need to ask the applicant if 12 months is truly enough time, or if they're going to need 18 months, or if we can take it back to review to allow them to continue, because we all know construction gets snagged and they have an aggressive timeline. And I think we want to make sure that we do everything possible to aid them in this project. With that being said, I do have a couple of concerns that, even though you don't want the nitty gritty, I'm concerned about El Camino Real southbound, coming out of the plaza or leaving the grocery store, if we'll still be able to make a left turn out of the middle of that shopping center. And also heading southbound, if we'll still be able to make a U-turn and flip back towards Del Rio. Because I live on the other side and I don't want to have to drive all the way down to San Anselmo to flip a turn and come back. I think those are my concerns there. The traffic circle, I wasn't sure, even reading the report, where that was being possibly proposed at. And then the other one, in the interim use, we should be allowing the applicant to live on site if they want to, or have security on site 24/7 during the entire project. That was brought up before, and I hear it's not, haven't heard it brought up tonight, but once they start cleanup, if they want to have somebody on site, we should allow them to have somebody on site on their acreage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak, please raise your hand. If you're on the phone, *9. I'm not seeing any other hands or anyone on the phone. I will ask our city clerk if there's anyone who has emailed in public comment.
There is not.
Okay. So I'll give it one last call. Anybody on the webinar wishing to speak, please raise your hand. Or if you're on the phone, *9. And Luke, am I correct in that I'm seeing nobody on the phone?
Correct.
All right. We'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to council and staff. So Director or Ms. Gleason, I would ask Mr. Monroe's concern. He was mentioning the quality of the road. I think he said at the bend in Del Rio and torn up road, and just some concerns with an interim use there. Are you familiar with what he's talking about in that particular area and what the concern might be?
I'm not in particular familiar. I do know that Del Rio in that section is sort of an older road and it's a little bit narrow. We have not looked at any traffic circulation yet for an interim use. And so we would need to look at that with any future conditional use permit, and could look at those details to ensure that that road could handle that level of traffic with RVs and larger type vehicles.
And then let's see, the question that Mr. Oslin had about leaving the grocery store, isn't that where it would then later connect with? Isn't the plan to connect with the project at that spot, or
it is
further down?
Yeah, it is not actually.
Okay.
Let me see if I can just.
So that's further down at kind of that behind, yeah.
It's
So then
by the subway at the end,
Right,
of,
by the
towards
subway.
the end of the site. Yeah.
So then will individual. What was that, Kelly?
We intentionally actually did not have an entry connection here into the project, specifically to retain the easy left out movement from the main Mission Oaks entrance and the ability to do a U-turn.
So that will still be kept. Perfect. That answers that question. And then just, I'm not sure that Mr. Oslin had a question, but noting that the traffic circle is inside the project. It's not on El Camino. Also, Mr. Oslin mentioned having security on site if the applicant requested that. Is that something that you've had a conversation with them about?
We haven't had a specific conversation. Under our current municipal code, they can have like a caretaker site security unit on site when they have an open construction permit. If we wanted to clarify that, they could have it during interim site uses regardless of an open construction permit. That could be added to the conditions of approval.
Okay.
Or the specific plan section regarding interim uses.
Okay, that they could have that if they desired. And then lastly, that question of phase 4, what if it isn't finished? And of course, that's something that we will be talking about. So if we bring this into 2 separate discussions, let's leave the interim use alone for a moment. Let me repeat, leave the interim use alone for a moment and let's look at the other. Sorry, Heather, I just have to give you a hard time. So the things that I really heard us talking about are, number one, Councilmember Borbo had brought up the question of affordable housing. Number two, potentially removing the CFD if that is something that makes sense economically and legally to do. And then number three, potential, phase 4. Do we look at some different type of phasing? The concern that we have of, could that remain vacant? Certainly we've seen that happen in Colony Square. You end up with multiple owners and you have these empty, but is it better to have part of it built than none of it built? A lot of things to think about. So those are kind of the three things besides interim uses that I really heard us having questions on. So for the affordable, yes, Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, I was just going to weigh in on the affordable housing
Please feel free.
component of that. So, because I didn't have questions on it, but I did want to discuss it. I do think that there's no compelling case why this property should be exempt from the affordable housing requirements that apply to other new developments in the community. There's great value to our community in having those low and very low income units be spread throughout the community and integrated into neighborhoods so that it's not, an obvious spot that gets designated. It's just, this is just another neighbor that you have. That being said, I would be willing to give staff the some ability to negotiate on the plan on that we don't necessarily need to have the deed restricted moderate units, given that we're approaching a high density thing and the general concept of the site is not going to be, it's going to be towards the, affordable by design regardless. And if that continues to be the thrust of it, I think that I'm comfortable with requiring the deed restricted low and very low and letting staff negotiate some way to demonstrate that these are going to sell ultimately as affordable units and let that go.
Okay, so I've got that from you. Let me get your input. Would you be open to removing the CFD?
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends on whether as long as we have enough security, enough other enforcement mechanisms so that we can make sure that those important public amenities are maintained that are external to the site.
Of course.
I don't see a need to have a CFD to do that.
Okay. So I'm going to get input on these two from each of you, and then we'll kind of talk about that phasing. So Councilmember Borbo.
Yeah, on the affordable housing, I wouldn't completely agree that there's no basis to exempt them because as written now, the specific plan, which I think was going to allow 72 or 76 residential units, didn't call for any. So, I mean, if I was the applicant, I would say, well, that's my expectation is it didn't call for any. To the extent they're asking for additional units, either in the sense of a few more in this, residential zoned area or additional units down in the multi-use or the mixed use commercial buildings, to the extent they're asking for additional units, I think it's fair to apply some degree of affordable housing requirement in that arena. I think we've had multiple conversations in the past along the lines of affordable housing, how what we really need is some of the low and very low, not the moderate. We tend to get a fair amount of that. And so but I am open to the idea that Councilmember Funk brought up of, letting staff work with the applicant on some of that. I would prefer the affordable by design approach, just because deed restricted ultimately involves administrative work on the part of our staff for a period of 30 or 40 or 50 years, depending on how we set it up. And so affordable by design, some much smaller units, either in the mixed use or in the residential zoned area that would meet the need and requirement, or the need for some low or very low units, I think is what I would would prefer to focus on, if you will. And again, based on the number of increased units. But I would be willing to leave it to staff to negotiate, but with that focus in mind on obtaining those low or very low income units.
And so, Charles, you're wanting to obtain those units with affordable by design within the 86 or the 130, whatever the number is, or are you saying only if they're asking for, say, state density bonus, and then which
Right. Well,
wouldn't even apply
no,
to other requirements?
I would apply it to whatever number of units are over and above what was allowed for in the original specific plan. And I believe that original number was 72 or 76 or something like that. I'm sure Phil would, or Kelly would know. But that the additional units that they want, whether it's in the residential zone or in the mixed use buildings, those are additional new residential units that are being envisioned. And those, I would agree that with Councilmember Funk on those, that there's no basis to exempt those from our affordable housing policy, but I would argue there is a basis to exempt the already allowed units that did not come with an affordable housing requirement.
Got it.
On the, I forgot what your other question was there. The CFD, yes, as long as the purpose of the CFD can be accomplished, then there's certainly no objection to eliminating that special CFD. They will be required, though, for the rest of the residential units enter into the regular citywide CFD.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Darris, on those two items.
On the affordable housing, I'm much more in favor of the affordable by design. I think there's a good opportunity here, also considering the density that we're looking at as well. But I think affordable by design is much more beneficial to the consumer anyway. So I like to be able to see us head and go in that direction. Deed restricted, I think, just as it's a long term. I don't see a whole lot of benefit in the future on that. But anyway, so just keeping it simple, I think affordable by design with those units, I think, is a really good idea. Let's go with that. And then on the CFD, yes, by all means, I think we can remove that requirement, provided that there is a mechanism in place to make sure that the maintenance of the landscape and whatever along there will be taken care of otherwise.
Got it. And Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
It would be nice to have affordable housing. I think everybody's trying to has a hard time affording anything. So I think it's really hard to force applicants to do low and very low deed restricted. So affordable by design seems to fit that mold. And I'm fine with removing the CFD as long as we've addressed all of the issues that it was intended for.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Director Densmore. We talk a lot about affordable by design. Is there a way to, without deed restriction, is there a way to have some of these be affordable by design in the low or very low category? Is that possible? I mean, really possible?
It might be. So I would say that it might not be as well. It's very challenging because you're going to have to guarantee that by the design of that unit, it's going to sell or rent at those low or very low rates. And for the most part, especially at the very low end, I think I have difficulty seeing the feasibility of designing something unless it's a small closet that can be that way. So it's challenging. I mean, if you took, let's say, for example, you had a 400 square foot studio.
Actually, don't need an example. I think we're good.
Yeah, it's tough.
What I would like to propose to bring us together, I liked what Councilmember Bourbeau said. I think the additional above and beyond, we could make the case to add that requirement to for the additional units over what was originally planned for. And within that, we could look at the different percentages. And is that something that, Phil, you would need from us tonight to say, in that additional, if we all agree on that, do we need to give you those exact percentages tonight, like the 20% and kind of?
Yes.
Through?
Yeah,
Okay.
it'd be good to have that in the master plan development in the specific plan language, so that when we come back with these refined conditional use permits. We know how to apply it, and that the applicant knows how to proceed forward and know what their performance is for their project.
So could you give us the page in the 315 pages that we're looking at? Because I know you detailed out the 20% and then what the percentages are of that 20%,
Yes.
or whatever percent we chose.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find it before Kelly finds it. No, she's probably going to beat me to it. Oh yeah, see that? She already
Oh,
has it.
she's going to bring it up here. Beautiful. I thought I was going to be looking down at my iPad. Beautiful. Okay. And then the moderate, we could go with non-deed restricted, but say, okay, 20% of additional units, 43 would need to be moderate, but not deed restricted. And then we could go with the 20% very low and 37% low income.
Mayor,
Yes.
could we not, since most of us have expressed a preference for affordable by design, in your question very on point of, is that really feasible? Could we leave that or express that the preference would be for these units to be achieved through affordable by design, but if that cannot be, then they would be, staff would look to make it deed restricted.
We can certainly say that. I think it would be, as Phil said, maybe a closet, but
No, I understand, but that's the point, is that, I mean, I would like to strive for that, but, without requiring it to come back to council, let staff work with the applicant, see if they can achieve affordable by design, and not rule it out. Let them see if they could achieve that, and if they can't, well, then it's, then it's going to have to be restricted.
well, we also don't want them to say, oh, here's a 200 square foot box and this is affordable
Right.
by design and here's your low income. No, that's not acceptable. So,
I think one of our issues too is that to qualify as affordable design, they have to be built, occupied, and rented so that we can look at their rental rates. So at that point, you've already given a certificate of occupancy to the units and you have potentially sold them and can't go back and require the deed restriction after the fact.
Okay, can you do it the other way around and require that you say it's going to be deed restricted, and unless after construction, they can show it's affordable by design and you release the deed restriction?
It's a good question.
Because it seems like, it seems like we box ourselves in government a lot, and sometimes it doesn't seem like we really need to do that. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
okay. If that's a question that someone can find the answer to in the next, few minutes or so, that would be great. Okay, let's talk about phasing if we could. Councilmember Funk, is there something you needed to say?
Yeah, I still wanted to weigh in on this. Because we're talking, if they have a 100-unit property, we're talking about, under the existing requirements for all the units, it would be only 4 units at very low income, and an additional 7 at low income. And my point is, I didn't propose those as affordable by design because I don't think that they are achievable in a development of quality without subsidy. So that's where I think that just with the mayor on that, I think that we have to think about that. If we're only talking about the marginal units, so that's maybe if they're doing 100 units and 72 of them are already exempt from this requirement, that'd be only 28 units that we're applying this requirement to. So you're talking about 1 very low income and maybe a couple of low income units. I was trying to work out the math here on the side, but so this is a very, that would be a very limited requirement for deed restricted units.
Yeah, I think if we're talking 130 units, which is where I saw multiple times in our agenda packet, and if 72 are what were original, if you take that difference in 20% and then 57%, we're talking about 6 or 7 units. So, yeah. Can we have a consensus then on the low and very low, kind of using this policy, 20% of the additional units and the 20% very low and the 37% low income deed restricted, unless after the fact, somehow we find out this is beautifully designed and affordable as is, we could remove that deed restriction. I'm pretty sure Laura and Brian aren't going to let us say that, but.
We're checking with our housing consultant on that question too,
Okay.
as well. We've never really explored that.
Fabulous. Consensus on that?
I can
Okay.
work with that.
Sam hesitating. Okay, wonderful. Lastly, let's talk about phasing before we get to the interim piece. I note, I see our city manager.
Just want to verify, Kelly, you have the 72 units in there, but on page 129 of the agenda, the old specific plan had 67.
So I believe the 67 was the anticipated development level, which was more the, I don't even know if it was the minimum. That was in between the minimum and maximum density.
Okay.
We certainly can use that number of units. The 72 sort of represents maximum density of the original site area.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure before we moved on.
Thank you for clarifying. Always good. Never good when the next day you're like, oh. All right, so before we talk interim phasing, Councilmember Bourbeau, and I know one of our members of the public had brought up the potential with phase 4, and this might be something that we want to ask Mr. Lawton. Mr. Lawton, if you're still here, I think you heard the concern about, could we just end up with phase 4 not going forward? Councilmember Bourbeau just kind of threw out for conversation, could we do part of phase 3 and then move to 4? What is your sense of the ability to move forward with phase 4?
Yes, Mayor Moreno, thank you. Wonderful question. Right now, as it stands, the way that we have our financing structured, it aligns with the phasing plan that we have proposed. The reason why we want to do the residential at the top is because that allows us to create enough equity to roll into the largest construction portion of the project, which is the large commercial uses. I don't see a way for us to qualify for financing doing it any other way unless we bring on some, very large pocket investor, which I mean, right now we don't necessarily have. So we've been very strategic, like I said in our presentation, about the phasing of our project and working with our bank, so that way we know, based on the way that the project moves forward, based on our income that is generated, or NOI, net operating income, it allows us to roll into a larger portion, then into a larger portion. And then really what gets us, and kind of like to Charles Bourbeau's point, what gets us the real equity, gets us over the hill to pay for the large portion of the project, or the large commercial portion of the project, is the sales of the homes. And we do plan on allowing for an air condo map for the mixed use along El Camino for that reason too. If we need to sell those to generate more capital, we have the flexibility to do so to allow us to achieve our financing goals in phase 4. If we try to mix it up one way or the other, I think it's I would really have to go back and spend another 2 or 3 days pouring through our pro forma, taking it all apart, reconstructing it, trying to figure out a way to get the income necessary to allow for us to qualify for additional construction loan funding. And I think that's going to be a big challenge.
Okay. I hear you on that, and it completely makes sense. I'll ask Councilmember Bourbeau, is that something that you brought up? Any other clarification or ideas that you have?
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised by the answer, and I understand the answer. But my question, I guess, would be to staff and the applicant. Okay, so let's say you do phase 1, the RV resort, then you build the residential, and you build half of phase. You build the portions of phase 2 that were indicated. Then you build the residential, and now you have some of those larger elements like the amphitheater and the hotel space sitting empty. What does that do to the viability of the project? So, we have this nice RV resort, but one of the amenities that, was designed to go with it, let's say the amphitheater or the entertainment center, or the conference, whichever one isn't built. What does it do to the overall viability of the project? And what are we as the city and the community left with in the sense of, okay, we have an RV resort, some houses, some mixed use buildings, and a couple of empty lots, 5 years from now, going on 6, 7, 8, 10 years from now, because you can't get a hotel operator. That's only my concern. I mean, and there's some degree of risk certainly for you and also for us as the community, though, when we approve this based on this premise that, you can build A, B, C, D, our concern being D never gets built.
So Charles, great question. Thank you. I mean, we do have an operator already selected who's interested in the site. They're a very large operator. You would know who they are if I said their name. Fortunately, I cannot say their name right now, but without the equity created through the sales of the homes, which is substantial, hotels are not there. The hotel specifically is going to be the most expensive portion of the project. The amphitheater is not. However, it's going to take a long time in order for us to get all the sound studies, to get all the right engineering. I think we do want to probably do some community outreach and engagement workshops with the neighborhood about it. I think there is some sensitivity. We haven't heard it tonight, but I think we do owe it to our community to participate in some engagement opportunity with that specific amphitheater. I know there's ways to engineer sound mitigation, which we're going to study everything, including engineering it into the software of the sound system, so it'll never go above certain levels. But as far as let's say you're right. Let's say the worst case scenario happens, and there are these empty pads that aren't built out. Maybe it takes a few years longer than what we're planning. I think we see those as wonderful opportunities to allow for more outdoor amenities and recreation uses. So while we're waiting to try to either raise the funds or do new debt structure or whatever, sometimes this stuff does take longer than expected. I think it's, again, we have that site activation and interim use that we're going to do very beautifully. Hopefully we get the approval for that. We see that those areas could still be used in that way for doing that, outdoor activities, like archery. I think there's axe throwing, there's arts and crafts that can be done. Again, there's more pop-up vendors we can include. That's our goal with this site, is to be able to generate as much economic benefit for the city and for our company. So to leave these sites empty, whether they're built out or not, I think would be a disservice to everyone, including all the residents in Atascadero, when they have a wonderful place to come and enjoy instead of letting them sit. That would be my preference and recommendation. If for some reason there was a delay or a holdup with either planning, permits, or funding for those portions of the project. However, if we phase it right, like I've been proposing, I don't see that happening. There is a very large demand right now. We just had a wonderful meeting with John King a few weeks ago. He came and checked out our Affordable by Design project at Grand Oaks. He absolutely loved it. He fell in love with it. He said, you guys are onto something. You definitely have created a new housing product type in our market. And he also shared with us that with the hotels that he owns, he's getting multiple calls a day for buyers, meaning that we are in the highest demand area for a hotel in all of the United States. And you can look at the research that's showing it right now. On top of that, you have the #1 performing asset class, which is the RV class, which is up 600% over the last 24 months. So I believe that this site is going to generate the necessary net operating income we're going to need to finish it out. We do have plan B, C, and D. We're very creative. We know what it takes to be successful financially, and we're going to do that.
Thank you. Oops, some feedback there. Thank you for that answer. And I guess I'm just pointing out that there's some degree of risk for the community as well. I would look at where our theater is, the whole Galaxy Square, where we have a nice theater. We've now successfully repurposed the old City Hall, but we have 3 significant lots, including one designated for a hotel, that have sat vacant for a number of years. and which holds back the overall success of that overall project. And so thank you for the answer. I think we just have to be cognizant that there is some risk to the community, but I do understand that it is completely in your interest to ensure that you get maximum use out of the property, and you know, you might try to come up with some alternatives if you couldn't get a hotel operator or something like that. All right, thank you for the answer.
And to Councilmember Borbo's point with Galaxy in the Colony Square, part of the challenge is we have multiple owners, and some are motivated, some are not, and that's been our challenge there. I think when you've got, and granted, this is, I mean, with this being a specific plan, I don't know. I mean, that's a quick question to Kelly or Phil. With this being a specific plan, having master plan of development, could you still like sell off individual lots, or is it not really set up to do that? You could still do that.
They could still do that. It really depends how they end up subdividing this property. Right now, there's roughly 14 lots on this site. They're going to have to get merged out and then re-subdivided to accommodate this development plan. And if they happenstance to want to sell portions of this site, yeah, it could act the same as Colony Square does, even though it has a specific plan. So definitely a valid concern.
So I think it's just something to note. You know, bottom line, I think we want to move forward with a project that is bringing a lot of value to our community. And there is a huge risk to the developer. Yes, there's a risk to the community. There's never going to be anything that is risk-free. I think the phasing plan that they've laid out makes sense. We certainly like seeing things move forward that start bringing in the TOT, having the commercial aspect before we have the residential. So can we all agree that the phasing looks to our approval tonight? Yes. All right. Lastly, we'll talk about interim uses. I think I get the sense we would all like to see the ability to do interim uses. We understand the importance to the project. If we could look to page 64, which talks about the temporary land uses and the things that we would need to be concerned with. And Kelly, if we have a slide for that, it looks like you may. Okay, and if you actually, if council, if you look to page 64, you'll see the real specifics here, because obviously what, you know, I'm sure the applicant has heard tonight, and from what the applicant has shared, I think we'd be, there you go. That it's coinciding with what we're thinking. One, we want something that's aesthetically pleasing. Two, we don't want this to go on year after year after year. Three, we want to have some ability to, you know, if something does keep going on, we want to have some ability to take action if need be, which is why that development agreement would be important. We want to make sure, you know, safety for residents and those that would be coming to our community. Of course, there's the dust mitigation issues, the utilities, all of those things that are listed here that I know, let's see, is that, yeah, that is the same thing as page 64. So I think what we would like to see, and we can nail down a little bit more direction for staff if need be, is we'd like to see an interim use with a development agreement. So we've got some teeth to it, and looking at these items in here, what they heard from us tonight. And if there is an extension that's needed because development, you know, is taking longer, I would like that to be an extension that comes back to council approval is what I would recommend. What are my colleagues thinking? Councilmember Funk.
I'm thinking that I mean, we wanted that it is in everybody's interests to have the finances of this project work in such a way that all of it gets built out. Yes. So I'm inclined to work ahead with an interim use, you know, for that reason. I'm inclined to give them more than 12 months, maybe 18 before it has to come back to council. I'd be comfortable if it comes to council or if it comes back to planning, but that if it's got to get sustained, either I could go either way on that. I do think that that I want the staff to negotiate this as a plan, because I want them to. I'm really not keen on having fencing you know, at the sidewalk level all around this thing as we saw depicted in that. I am painfully mindful of how fencing around dirt lot is working in Colony Square. And so the maintenance of, I mean, obviously that's not a look that the app would serve the applicant either, but you know, let's be attentive to what the options are so that we get something that looks nice for the community as this moves forward. I am not, one of the options was floating a bond for site restoration if it doesn't go forward. I think that defeats the purpose. Now, the purpose of the interim uses is to allow the cash flow that lets the project survive and deliver value to the community as well as to the
So would you be in favor of a development agreement?
I would be in favor, but that's why I said I wanted the staff to negotiate an agreement that includes those things so that you can get some of that ironed out and staff to come back with some of those details. And I'm not sure that site restoration, I mean, what do we have there? Dirt lot with some really nice trees. That restoring that has any particular value in terms of the conditions listed on page 64. So I would give that as guidance to staff, you know, in terms of that, and would check, you know, at the end of this, ask staff if we have enough detail for them to proceed in negotiating the agreement that we've discussed.
Sounds good. And Mayor Pro Tem Newsom, I thought I had seen your hand go up right as, yeah.
So many topics we've discussed this evening. Yes, I would agree with Councilmember Funk.
Excellent. Councilmember Daris?
I'm okay with the phasing as it was described. Phase 4, the final one, as it's been discussed, I'm going to echo that there's always some risk, of course. I don't want to see an unfinished project. Nobody does. This is a highly visible corner. People, you know, driving in, you know, either one of the directions you're going to see this. So I think, you know, what Ted is proposing for the interim with the for the RV, for the temporary RV, if it's as high quality as it's described, you know, if it could stay that way, you know, for an extended period of time because maybe phase 4 can't be started, I would be okay with that. I think it was suggested that longer than 12 months for, you know, for this or for the phase would be is acceptable. I just think it's the quality. Just what are we going to see if this has to be extended because phase 4 can't be started? I think is the most important thing. And if we can get into an agreement with that, that's where I would go.
Thank you, Councilmember Bourbeau.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything that Councilmember Funk addressed on this. I would agree with, you know, 18 months is reasonable. I mean, I'm not the least bit excited about this interim use, but I think I am, you know, committed to us working with applicants like this to, you know, try to make their project work, because overall this is, you know, this project I think brings a lot of exciting things for the community, and we do need to try to help make that work. And I think, you know, so I can support an interim use for that purpose, but I do have the same concerns that Councilmember Funk raised about that will be kind of worked out in the details. You know, the way he showed the picture with fencing, yeah, that didn't look very nice. But obviously they're going to want it to be as nice as possible for people to stay there and generate revenue. So we have you know, I don't think we're working at cross purposes at all. And I would agree that portion is not very attractive right now. So I don't think we need to dwell on site restoration in the first place. We could have them put back some old broken up concrete too, if we wanted to be precise. But so I agree with, I think, pretty much everything else that was said. I would just be concerned about the conditions that are applied, because there is a tension between wanting the interim use to look as nice as possible versus them, you know, not wanting to invest too much in an interim use. You know, that would have to be replaced, but I can support it in order to help make the project financially feasible for them.
Thank you. And I think that is the concern for all of us, is helping us to move forward and be financially feasible to get it moving as quickly as possible too. It was interesting what Mr. Monroe said. He would have liked to have seen an interim use all along rather than a chain link fence and a bunch of, you know, crumbled concrete or foundation. So yeah. Let's see, what's the extension of city council? And I think just knowing in there that you've heard what we said about aesthetics. Do you need more detail? I'm pretty sure that you don't, but you know where we're coming from an aesthetic place. We don't want to put an overburden that this has got to be the prettiest thing you've ever seen, but you know, chain link fence with a bunch of posters may not be the route we're going. We're looking at the landscaping, but just making this a pleasant environment.
Yeah, I think we have direction on that to incorporate into the use permit. It's probably a little bit too specific for this specific plan language, but we do have to work with the applicant on that.
Perfect. All right.
So just to be clear, then I think just on this interim use request, it sounds like council's leaning towards, okay, we're okay with some of these conditions, use permit, but would feel more comfortable if it's ratified through a development agreement.
Yes.
In addition to a conditional use permit, just to ensure that we have an enforcement mechanism. Is that how I'm,
You
just
are
to clarify?
You are correct on that, yes.
All right. I do think the applicant's really concerned about the layer of development agreement. I'll just tell you that. And would rather have it just be conditions of approval, but I'll just, you know, maybe there can be a simplified way to add that mechanism to one of these conditions so that it's not a full-blown. Sometimes a development agreement can become a very substantial legal document. You got attorneys on two different sides battling over this thing for a while.
I think our biggest concern is that we don't want it, as I think Councilmember Bourbeau said it very well. If something isn't being done according to the conditional use permit, we send a letter and say, please do this. And then we're sending a second letter that says, please, with an exclamation point, et cetera, et cetera. So that's our concern about being able to have that enforcement mechanism. If there is a simpler way to go about it, a development agreement that doesn't contain, you know, every flower that is to be planted, but is there something that allows that enforcement? Because this is something that is unusual that we're granting. We understand the importance of it, but we also see how this could get away from us quickly and not be a benefit to the community.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I guess we already have it in these. I guess we already put that in this interim use request language. It might just be that a mechanism. I mean, we could say a mechanism to ensure the timing of the completion of the interim use and phasing to permanent improvements shall be included. But, you know, maybe subject to a development agreement or a similar mechanism. Something like that is kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe there can be a little bit of flexibility so we find out that, you know what, the development agreement actually is the best way. Or maybe there's another way, such as a financial guarantee or a bond or something else that could be done that makes it simpler.
So Mr. Lawton, could you weigh in here? We're hearing from our director that might not be your preference. You understand our concern that we do want to have some enforcement. And so beyond, you know, your verbal assurance, which, you know, certainly means something, but we're looking for something beyond that. So when you look at the options available to us of a development agreement, a bond, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, good evening. Great question. So, you know, we've been speaking with our consultants. We have a 30-year city manager who we've been working with. We also have a local city attorney who we've been working with, discussing what the options are here. And quite honestly, you know, we were under the impression that a CUP can act exactly as a development permit. It's the same language. You could put in one or the other. It does the same thing. So what our preference would be is just include the language that you would include in a development agreement in the conditional use permit, and it will act the same way. That's our understanding. That's what our consultants are telling us. If you want to add other financial sureties or guarantees, I mean, you know, that's up to you. I'm not going to, you know, tell you, you know, you guys need to do what you need to do on your end to feel comfortable. I mean, obviously, we believe that a CUP with the proper language can be can work very efficiently. It can function and do everything that you're trying to do with the development agreement. All a development agreement does at this point is slows down the process. Now we get attorneys involved. You know, you're going to have to write a CUP anyways. Let's just incorporate that language into the CUP. And that would be my recommendation, but I would obviously allow you to confer with your city, council.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. So I would ask our city manager, potentially our city attorney. I think, Rochelle, you know what our concern is. Do you see the ability for us to do that? You know this well.
I would like to do some research to be able to do it. I think the language that Phil suggested that has, you know, the flexibility that if we can do it without a development agreement and get that surety and those guarantees and that enforcement mechanism you want through the CUP, we can certainly go that way. But understand that if we can't do that, that it would require a development agreement, that council wants us to go that way.
Okay. And Mr. Pierrick, is there anything that you had to add to that, or knowing you, it's probably something that needs to be researched?
Well, I generally try to make sure that my answers are based on the law. And so I have actually given this some thought before this evening. And the research that we would be doing would be focused. It's the issue I think has been spotted very well, which is we all know, I think, based on the conversation and discussion this evening, as to what the requirements are that the city wants to apply to this project. And the only issue is whether or not those can be included in a conditional use permit and be legally enforceable, or if a development agreement would be required. If we find in our research that these requirements are enforceable in a conditional use permit, and that a development agreement is not necessary, then we're certainly not going to insist on a development agreement. On the other hand, if we find in our research that a development agreement would be necessary for the enforcement of some of the conditions, then we'll end up going in that direction.
Okay, thank you. So I would ask Rochelle and Brian, does that second bullet, a development agreement or similar mechanism for enforcement shall be required? Does that suit our purposes for tonight?
My answer would be yes.
And mine would too.
Okay.
And staff does understand the need for speediness to do this, so we will work towards that.
Okay. So are my colleagues set on the interim use requested what we're moving forward with? All right.
Yeah.
Councilmember Funk, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just going to note that you know, a CUP will be a planning commission level approval rather than the council level approval that the mayor was indicating, at least for an extension of the. I see it is in the extension is granted by city council. Okay, yeah, the CUP. But if for some reason we felt that the CUP needed to be monitored at a higher level, those are appealable to council for that detailed review.
Well, I think that is the first one, does say city council review and approval of the conditional use permit.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I see that is set there now. Okay.
All right.
We're good.
So unless I've got notes in front of me, so if you'd like me to try to craft the motion, I will do that. All right.
I'm good with that.
And I just also wanted to make sure, remind you, Mayor, of the amendments that the staff was suggesting.
Yes.
To go through.
So if you could bring up the, let's see, I've got 3 pages here. So moving adoption of draft, I move adoption of draft resolution A, and then introduce for first reading by title only, draft ordinance approving a zoning map amendment and amendments to the Del Rio Road commercial specific plan based on findings with the changes noted, and adopt draft resolution B as amended by staff for conditions 4, 100, C, and 101, including D. And then to also include the language with regards to the affordable housing that Ms. Gleason put together, to remove the CFD, but continue to make sure that there is an enforcement of maintaining that property. Perfect.
So that one, I did some modifications to condition 17. And then condition 16 above that in your packet is some strong language about what the owners are required to maintain, and does include all of those features, including any medians and frontage landscaping.
All right, thank you. And the phasing we're good with, and then to allow interim, if you could go to the wording for interim phasing, or interim use, sorry. Okay, and then also adding this language for interim use request as noted here, section 4.1.12. Does that do everything that everybody needs it? Does that check the box for Phil, Kelly, Laura, Rochelle, Brian? All right, I'm going to assume all the boxes are checked. Do I have a second?
Well, I have a question.
No, you don't.
I'll second if you want, but I have a question.
Yes.
If you could go back to where the language that Kelly came up with on the affordable housing.
Yes.
You said, 20% of any excess units, got it. Shall be deed restricted at the following ratio. Okay, so that is to say the moderates though wouldn't need to be deed restricted. They could be by design.
Correct.
Okay, then I'm okay. So,
and I
okay.
see the city manager on, so now I'm concerned.
I do not.
You're good. All right.
I'm good.
Motion by Mayor Moreno, second by Councilmember Borbo. Roll call, please.
I actually do have a question on the recommendation. So what we're adding with the bottom recommendation, the way that it appeared with the allowing the temp uses, is that what's being added to the draft ordinance? And do we have that language? Because the way that it reads on what you just put up for the recommendation, it says PC suggest. Can you go down to the next slide, Kelly? So I just want to clarify, PC suggests addition of temporary use allowances. You have that as part of the draft ordinance, but that's for the specific plan, right?
Yeah, so I think what we were saying is if they wanted to add in the temporary uses, this would be the language.
Okay, that I just want to make sure that that's clear, that it's not part of the second, that third recommendation where she was talking about resolution B.
No, it's a fourth recommendation.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you. Just want to make sure I'm clear like that for the public. Okay, so.
And may I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Does the language in conditional modifications on slide 23, is that also included in the motion?
Yes, I heard that from Mayor Moreno, that there would be the modifications to condition 4, condition 100C, and condition 101 A and D.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Borbo.
Yes.
Councilmember Funk.
Yes.
Councilmember Daris.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
All right.
Laura, did we need to read the?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you.
To read the ordinance.
Yes. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Atascadero, California, approving a zoning map amendment and amendments to the Del Rio Road Commercial Area Specific Plan for the Del Rio Ranch project. Now we are set.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's see. We still have a closed session to go to, so let's see if we can move through these next two items as swiftly as we are able. So item B2, adopting the sewer service charges to be added to the 2021-2022 property tax rolls. I will ask my colleagues if there's any ex parte.
No, but I'm going to be changing locations momentarily. I'll be listening.
Okay. I received an email from someone who was thinking we should possibly wait because it's not a great time to raise fees. But other than that, I have received no input or ex parte. So we'll move this on to Director Nick DeBar. And Director, if you're talking, you're muted.
Okay, I'm here.
There you go.
I'll try to do this in 1,000 words or less. I'm just kidding. I've just got a few slides here. So the purpose of tonight's public hearing isn't to, it's not a rate increase or anything. It's actually to place a levy on the sewer customers' property taxes. So the city does not have or provide water. So we do not bill monthly or quarterly. We actually collect sewer service charges on property taxes. This year, there's 5,516 parcels being levied, and there's a total of $3,320,523. Customers will see on their property tax statement, this is a charge that'll come up as ATAS sewer charge. And the county deadline to get this on the next year's levy is July 15th. So we still got some time and we're looking good. And then the numbers on the exhibit, the county does add $2 to each of these assessments, and that's their charge to collect. This table is current charges. These rates went into effect on they'll go into effect on July 1st, but were approved by City Council at their May 25th meeting. And then again, I think this is an important chart to keep showing, but our sewer rates are still the lowest in the county and the region. So with that, recommendations tonight is to conduct the public hearing to receive verbal testimony regarding the proposed sewer service charges to be levied upon or onto property tax rolls, and then adopt the draft resolution approving sewer service charges to be added to the 2021-2022 property tax rolls. And with that, I can take any questions.
We do this every year. You're getting really good at it. Any council questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up to public comment. If there's anybody on the webinar that wishes to speak, please raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, you can press *9. I'm seeing none. I will ask our city clerk if there are any emails to be read into the record.
There are not.
All right, seeing no one wishing to speak, I will close public comment and bring it back to council for a motion.
I'll move we adopt staff's recommendation and adopt the draft resolution approving sewer charges.
We have a motion by Council Member Bourbeau and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Newsom. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bourbeau?
Yes.
Councilmember Darris?
Yes.
Councilmember Funk?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom?
Yes.
Mayor Moreno?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. On to item B3, Community Facilities District 2005-1, annexation number 23. Do we have any ex parte? Seeing none, we'll turn that over to our Community Development Director, Mr. Phil Dunsmore. And Phil, if you're talking, you're on mute. Don't tell me you fell asleep during Nick's presentation. It wasn't that long.
Perhaps Phil stepped away. Laura, do you want to just chime in, as this item will need to be continued to a public hearing on July 13th?
Sure. We just need to do some legal public noticing. And since we did, this was set as the public hearing date in the resolution of intention, we'll just need to go ahead and open public comment and then leave public comment open and just continue this to the date certain of July 13th so that we can continue the hearing and do that.
Thank you, Laura, for filling my words in. I did just step away. I apologize. I couldn't get my computer to come back on when you were. Sorry, I apologize for that.
All
Nick
right.
Nick was way faster than I ever could have imagined.
Right? It's good.
Completely threw me off.
All right. So with that, I'm going to open public comment. If there's anyone wishing to comment on this item, *9 or raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll ask, were there any emails to be read into the record?
There were not.
All right. So we will continue this item to date certain, July 13th. Thank you very much. All right. No management reports. We'll go on to council announcements and committee reports. And I'll just follow my Hollywood squares here, starting with Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Pull out my list here. The only thing I have to report that I attended the mayor's meeting on your behalf, which was a pleasure to sit with others and have our first mayor meeting in person in San Luis. And we just kind of discussed all of the different issues that we had coming for us, Del Rio Ranch, homelessness. So it was nice to have community leaders come together, and I appreciate that opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you for going on my behalf. Much appreciated. Councilmember Funk.
Yes, had a charter meeting of the Homeless Services Oversight Council Executive Committee last week, and we approved the HSOC chair signing on a letter of support to People's Self-Help Housing, which it has a project pending in Atascadero, and they are seeking to designate 10 of those affordable housing units for veterans so that they can qualify for some additional funding. And the committee agreed to support that. We also have new grant programs that are coming forward for consideration at the next HSOC meeting. That's the key things.
Thank you. Councilmember Darren's.
APCD meets tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'll report on the outcome of it in a couple weeks.
Wonderful.
That's all I got.
Councilmember Bourbeau.
Yes, at our last Integrated Waste Management Authority meeting, at the end of that meeting, Mr. Steyer, the executive director, announced his departure, taking a new position out of state. And also, as a result of the end of that meeting, I'm now the president of the board. Very poor timing on my part. So we've already had 2 special meetings of the executive committee to address how to fill the role of executive director going forward. And this is a busy and confusing time for the Integrated Waste Management Authority with the county as an agency talking about potentially wanting to leave, withdraw from the joint powers agreement that creates the IWMA. And there also at the last meeting, there was an amendment to the joint powers agreement that was created for the purpose of implementing, allowing the IWMA to implement on jurisdictions' behalf the requirements of SB 1383. Then that would typically be forwarded to the jurisdictions, including the city of Atascadero, for approval of that amendment. However, a majority of the Board of Supervisors did not vote for that, which could mean that when it goes to the county for referral, that they might not approve the amendment, which would also have implications on the future of the IWMA. So anyway, we're in for some busy times, and our first task is to cover the executive director role.
Well, glad you are in that role.
Well, I'm glad somebody's glad I'm in that role.
And yes, everybody has been filling in for me the last several weeks, so thank you all. And I have nothing particular to report. And actually, July, SLOCAG and RTA will be dark, which has never happened in my tenure that both were dark in the same month. So I feel like July will be a vacation month. All right, we are moving on to individual determinations or actions. Do we have any of those? Councilmember Funk.
One brief item that's to note is part of my responsibilities as HSOC chair. I am part of a small working group that's not a Brown Act committee, developing the 0 to 10 year plan to address homelessness countywide in all our jurisdictions. This involves a lot of communication with different constituencies, such as the city managers and and all kinds of different interest groups, law enforcement groups that meet regularly, and also includes the mayor's group. In that context, I will be in conversations outside the Brown Act with Mayor Moreno. So she and I have agreed to avoid conversations on housing and homelessness with other members of the council so that we can be able to each fulfill our duties in that context. And I appreciate everyone understanding.
Thank you very much. And we do understand that Councilmember Bourbeau will still be able to serve as the alternate on HSOC with that being a public committee, so there is no problem there.
Yes.
All right. Seeing no other individual determinations, not seeing any from staff as well, we are going to adjourn our meeting and return to our closed session. So for those of you who joined us this evening for the council meeting, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. We will move on to closed session, and any reportable action, if any, will be reported out at our next regular session on July 13th. So good night all, and we can leave this meeting and go into our closed session.